Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Even Stevens Ranked Podcast, the podcast for all things Even Stevens. I'm Brittany Butler.
I'm Ethan Bram.
And today we have an extremely special guest on the podcast with us. You know him, you love him. He played Alan Twitty on the show. It is AJ Trauth. How you doing, man?
Hey, you guys. Very good, very good. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you. Yeah, how you holding up during the whole COVID thing?
I'm doing better than ever.
Yeah?
This has been great. Yeah. You know, the life of working in the entertainment industry and being an actor, there's a lot of sitting around, a lot of downtime. So I'm very good at this and have been making the most of my time, taking advantage of the opportunity to play more music, to do more surfing. It's been great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, wait, let me just say, not to be insensitive about the seriousness of everything that's going on, but, you know, all considered, it's I've been having the most enjoyable time possible, I think.
Nice. How's the music going?
You know, music was my entire life for so long, and then it just kind of slowed down, transitioned out of it for a multitude of reasons, which we can get into if we want to. But having taken that step away from it for quite a while, I've really enjoyed folding it back into my life just because it gives me so much joy. So even if it's as simple as just playing guitar by myself, has been great. So it's no longer something that I pursue professionally, but it's something that I love and has been a part of my life since I was 13 years old. So yeah, it's been great kind of stepping back into it, having taken that time off.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Sorry, some kids were just screaming by my window. Just, if you could hear that, I apologize.
The usual, you know, just kids screaming. I think they knew I was on the show and then they just were screaming.
They were just riding their bikes and screaming at the top of their lungs.
Trying to look at the Skype screen, typical.
No, but that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to keep doing what you love.
Yeah, I wrote you a letter when I was about 12 or 13. You had a band at the time named Badge.
Oh, yeah. So Badge is the original incarnation, and then it changed to Maven. But this is great.
Okay.
What did the... tell me more.
So I was like 12 or 13, and I was totally Even Stevens was my life in junior high. It like really framed my junior high life. And so I wrote you a letter, shamelessly plugged that I'm a harmonica player. And that
oh, cool. Did you know that I played harmonica too, or no?
And I think I read it in an interview or something.
Oh, cool.
I think they put that in the show once for like 1 second.
Did they?
Yeah, you like whip out a harmonica and just start playing for like 1 second, then it cuts to another scene.
Oh yeah, no, that's true.
I don't remember that, but that's great.
And so I was like, oh hey, if your band ever needs a harmonica player, you know, I'm your guy. And
amazing.
It's so silly, but
you're shooting the shot.
Yeah. Good for you.
But you're very kind, and you said, the band isn't looking for any new players right now. But you did say that you had your band Badge, which I'm assuming was named after the Clapton Cream song. Yeah. So
yeah, So it was Clapton's band, but it was Blind Faith. They did Badge.
Oh, Blind Faith. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Not to be a music snob.
Oh, no.
But why not? But why not just throw that out there? First off, I love that you wrote the letter, and I love that I wrote you back. And there's a real chance that my mother did the writing back.
Okay.
Because I was like, there's like fan mail coming in. This is cool and everything, but I just want to like hang out with my friends and
definitely
play guitar. So occasionally I would write letters, and occasionally she would write letters. It was a bit of a tag team effort, but
nice.
Either way, I'm glad that you got a letter back. That is, that's something.
Yeah, and then here's cool. It's a copy because it's at my parents' house up in the Bay Area, but here is
oh yeah, to Ethan. What did I write? Rock on?
Yeah, Rock on. That's what you said.
That was I would write two things on the headshots that I would sign. I would write Rock On, which I discovered later, and I was like, this is sweet. Yeah. I'm really glad about this. I discovered Rock On.
Yeah.
And the other one was Thanks for Watching, but I would write it with an X and the number 4.
It actually says that on the letter itself. It was thanks,
really?
THANX for writing.
I would write that too.
Yeah. Used both tricks.
But the name for Badge I did an episode of The Amanda Show
Yep.
with Amanda Bynes, and Drake Bell was on that show. They had a schoolroom, so I was in the schoolroom, and Drake was playing guitar, because Drake always played guitar and sang. Mm-hmm. I was like wanting to learn how to write music and stuff, and he told me, oh, you only need to know 3 chords and you can write a song. So I'm like, oh, wow, this is cool. And then I started writing music, and that was really exciting. And then Drake had a birthday party, I think. And for some reason, I believe it was his father knew that I played harmonica, and I got on stage and played harmonica with Drake in the Drake Bell Band for like a song. And there was a music manager in the audience named Christopher Sabeck. Christopher Sabeck was the music manager for Hanson, whom you may or may not remember.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
And Chris Sabeck had this this brilliant idea. And Chris was a great guy, and I'm sure he's doing something. He like managed the Jerry Garcia estate in San Francisco for a while and managed some other bands. So he's doing something. But he had this brilliant idea that Drake and I should be in a band together, and Drake's going to be the singer-songwriter type, and I'm going to be like this musician type and play the harmonica and stuff. And the band, and he said he like came to him in a dream or something, like a vision. He's like, we're going to call the band Badge. Okay, it's going to be like this throwback to the 60s, early 70s music, and we were going to cover this song by the Byrds. Hey now, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. That song?
Buffalo Springfield, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Buffalo Springfield. There you go. So we were going to cover, that was going to be our first song, our first single. We were going to cover that. And it was this whole vision that came to him.
That's so specific.
It's so specific. And then he had us meet with these 2 music producers, Michael Corcoran, who went on to work with Drake and myself on a bunch of music and continued for years with Drake. And then Michael went on to do all of the music for like every Nickelodeon show and a lot of Disney projects. And I think he still does all of that music, but he had us work with these 2 producers. And then Drake and I split ways because we had creative differences at 14 or 15 years old. Decided, oh, we can't do this. We can't work together. So we split up. But that's where the name Badge came from. Is Christopher Sabeck and the Drake Bell, AJ Trauth. Very, very short-lived project. And then I went on to play with my brothers, and we just kept the name because we thought it was cool.
Nice. Do you ever still talk to Drake or no?
I haven't seen or spoken to Drake in a really long time. I'd like to see him. Yeah, it's been a minute, but yeah, I'd like to say hello.
Cool.
Interesting how you brought up the Amanda Show. We got a comment that said, ask him if he has any memories of the Amanda Show.
Oh man, so there was that, and then so I played like cute guy or hot guy number 2 was my role name.
Yep.
Which was funny in itself. And then I remember I was leaving the set of the Amanda Show, and the hair guy or makeup guy came running out and said, hey, Amanda would like to maybe hang out sometime. And he gave me Amanda's phone number.
Okay.
And then I remember calling Amanda, and we tried to like meet at a roller rink or an ice rink or something out in Thousand Oaks, wherever she lived with her parents. And I drove around with my friend and my friend's mom for hours trying to find this ice rink. Never found it, or like we pulled up at the very end as she was leaving, and that was it. So tried to hang out with Amanda, but never really panned out.
Oh my gosh. Because you were also in probably one of the more disturbing skits, which was the Popper Pants.
Oh, yes, I do remember that. I do remember that, yeah. I think we filmed the 2nd episode or something. I don't think it was that same episode, Popper Pants, yeah.
The popcorn you make in your pants.
Does that exist online someplace?
Oh, yeah.
That is on YouTube, yes.
Oh, I'm gonna try to find this, Popper Pants.
These just giant silver pants.
Yeah, they were like Jiffy Pop, and the kernels would...
Yep.
Yeah.
They cut open the back of the pants, and then they eat the popcorn out of the pants.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. Actually, just with the music real quick, because my mom had a question, and I'm wondering as well. Who were your favorite bands and influences just as a person, as a musician?
Well, it's funny how you have your favorite bands as a musician and songwriter, and then you go and write music, and you write stuff, at least this was my experience.
And it sounds nothing like it.
It sounds nothing
Yes.
like what you were going for. And you're like, well, how do I get from where I'm starting to my influences? And the road seems so incredibly long. But I listened to a lot of blues music, like roots blues music and blues influence rock from the 60s and 70s. That was my main bag. And that came from both of my parents. My father is a Chicago blues guy and my mother was a singer and songwriter. My father owned a guitar store growing up, so there were always vintage guitars around and vintage amplifiers. And so I listened to a ton of Eric Clapton because that was my parents' favorite. Layla and other sort of love songs. The band's name is Derek and the Dominoes was one of my all-time favorites. Listened to a lot of Rolling Stones, a lot of Beatles, a lot of different blues artists like Little Walter, speaking of harmonica, a lot of Freddie King.
Nice.
Those would probably be the two main blues artists, and then other people would filter through there. Then I would listen to like pop music at that time too. Hanging out on Even Stevens, Margot always had these really cool bands to check out that were from Orange County. Like she was the first person to tell us all about Jack Johnson and Brushfire Fairy Tales. So we listened to a lot of that, like when it was still a bootleg CD,
Nice.
it hadn't come out on a record label yet. Listened to a lot of Weezer, listened to Jimmy Eat World, driving back and forth with my mother from Las Vegas, where my family had moved to from Chicago, and Los Angeles. We would listen to a lot of what was on the radio at the time, like Bare Naked Ladies and Third Eyed Blind and Matchbox 20.
Nice. B&Ls are my favorite band.
Oh, really? I saw them in concert once. It was incredible.
They're amazing in concert.
It was such a great experience.
Oh, yeah.
But it's interesting how you have these aspirational musical influences, and then there's the stuff that you are soaking up on a regular basis because it's the bands that you hear on the radio and you hear them at the mall, and there's nothing that you can do about it, and they're getting baked into your subconscious. That just happens for better or worse. There's not much you can do about it. So I always found myself being a bit frustrated, at least at the time that I was really writing heavily, of what I was outputting and what I wanted it to sound like.
Exactly.
I was always left wanting, I felt like.
Definitely.
Musicians go through that. It's that's funny. So getting into Even Stevens stuff, of course.
Sure.
You have to take us back to the beginning of how you got into acting and how that led you to Even Stevens. Getting
into acting was, I feel like there's two ways young people get into acting. Maybe there's more, but I'm going to boil it down to two. There's you're a really, really young kid. You don't know what's happening. You find yourself auditioning. Your parents kind of bring you into it. And you have this first memory of acting where you sort of become conscious of what's actually taking place, and you go, oh yeah, I'm doing this acting thing. So that would start for kids that are getting into it at 4 years old or younger, or somewhere around that age, and they start doing commercials and stuff. They really have no say over the decision to start acting. Maybe they have say later on. And then there's those that get into it. This is just strictly speaking about kid actors. There's those that get into it a little bit later in life, like let's say around the age of 10 or after, where you do decide, hey, I want to try this acting thing, whether because you've watched something that you enjoyed or you did a play at school and you really liked it. And I was in that latter camp. So I was around 11 years old and was watching movies like Romeo and Juliet and Scream and Can't Hardly Wait, and just was like obsessed with this feeling that I got watching these movies. I just thought it was so cool. So I knew I wanted to participate based on this feeling that I had watching stuff. And the only way I knew how to participate was the thing that I could see, which was the actors. I decided, I want to be an actor. I don't know how I'm going to go about doing this thing, but I want to try that out.
Yeah.
So there was a local acting school where I was living at the time, and I started going there, and the person that owned the acting school had relationships with agents and managers in Los Angeles and said, hey, well, let's try to meet some people. So I met some people and ended up getting an agent and went on some auditions, and I really had no idea what I was doing. I think I went to like 6 months of acting classes. I wasn't a natural per se, and started auditioning and got a couple of jobs here or there. So my mom and I had gone to Los Angeles to try it out, and we were pretty much ready to go back to Las Vegas, where the family was living at the time. And the audition for Even Stevens came through.
By the time you auditioned, they had already filmed the Spivey's Kid Brother pilot.
Right.
Which Twitty was not a part of.
Right.
He was nowhere to be found. So I always wondered if you knew anything about how Twitty came to be, if they were, looking to give, Lewis the best friend, the best guy friend or something.
Yeah. When I got the audition, I believe it was still called Spivey's Kid Brother. Mm-hmm. It was to play the best friend of this character, Lewis. A lot of friends that I had, they knew what the audition was because they had auditioned for the part of Lewis. And I never did audition for the part of Lewis. And perhaps it was always going to be a brown-haired kid.
Yeah.
So a lot of my brown-headed friends, a lot of my brunette friends had gone out for the part of Lewis. I never saw it. So I auditioned for the part of Twitty. It was on the 21st floor of the Disney Channel building, which would become like this place that, a big part of my life, the 21st floor at the Disney Channel building in Burbank. This was my first time going there. You start the audition process and you just go for the first audition with the casting director, and then you go for a call back, and maybe there's a producer there. And eventually, you on your third or fourth call, there's, a half a dozen people in the room that are the producers or the writers or maybe the director and people from the studio or people from the network. This is something I would learn about later, but at this point, it was my first time getting into something like this. So this audition process, I just recall it being a lot of fun the whole time. And just to take a step back, when my mother and I were actually driving back to Las Vegas when the audition came through, this was before there was email on your cell phone and stuff, and my agent called and said, where are you guys? We've been trying to get a hold of you forever. We have this audition. And like, oh, we're driving back to Los. No, you have to turn around. You have to come back. The audition's today. It's this afternoon. And you come to the office. You could either receive a fax to get your audition sides, or, there's no time for the fax. So you have to come to the office and pick up the sides and go right to the audition. So that's what we did. And then eventually getting to this point where I was, maybe my third or fourth call, I recall Matt Dearborn, who is the creator of the show, started doing some improv with me. And so he's like, okay, so now you and Lewis are in the cafeteria, and you have to tell Lewis, like, oh, I don't know, man, this might not be such a good idea. And which essentially became, Twitty's
the entire show,
main thing he would say. Yeah, like, I don't know, Lewis, I don't know if we should do this. It was a lot of fun, and was absolutely thrilled when I got the job. It was right around this time that this movie called Brink on Disney Channel had come out. Mm-hmm. And I was crazy about this movie Brink. I thought it was the greatest thing. And Disney Channel wasn't really on my radar. I was a Nickelodeon kid up till that point.
Yeah, same with us, yeah.
And because they had all the good shows, Salute Your Shorts and
my favorite, Salute Your Shorts.
Pete and Pete, and some good stuff. So
and Disney Channel was a premium network before that.
Oh, was it?
So I think that's why a lot of us didn't have it.
Okay, so you had to pay extra?
Yeah,
never had that thing.
Even Stevens was one of the first shows after it became non-premium.
Oh, interesting.
Which I think that's another conversation for a little later.
Okay.
But yeah.
So Brink came out. I was totally crazy about Disney Channel at this point. And when I got Even Stevens, I just remember this feeling of, oh my gosh, I get to be on Disney Channel. This is so cool. And then I started working on the show. But so they had shot, as you alluded to, they shot the pilot maybe 6 months prior, maybe even it was longer than that. And so when I showed up on set, everyone else had already worked together and had a little bit of a relationship. Mm-hmm. So my first scenes, I did feel a little bit like the outsider. And I was just so nervous getting there. So there was a little bit of a learning curve there. But I think it was pretty quick that I felt like I was a part of the team and was really happy to be there. We had a different set of showrunners in the beginning. I think you guys know, like the first 6 episodes before Mark and Dennis came on board. And that was a little bit different, that window working on those episodes. Yeah, so that's how I got on the show.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Do you know of anyone else who auditioned for Twitty?
Yeah, I believe, I could be wrong about this, but I think Sean Pyfram, who was a friend from back in the day as kid actor. Sean went on to work on Desperate Housewives, I believe, for a long time. I think he also auditioned for Twitty. No one else comes to mind. He would be the only one I remember.
Okay.
Yeah, so since the show had already been cast when you went in for the auditions, I'm assuming you eventually had to do chemistry reads at all, did you? Or did you not do that?
I could, I don't remember exactly. Part of my memory says that I read with Shia in the audition, and then I'm also thinking that it was just Matt Dearborn. I can't remember for sure.
Right.
But there was a casting director, so every other role on that show was cast by a casting director named Joey Paul Jensen.
Okay. Yep.
And my role, Twitty, I believe, was the only role that was cast by Disney Channel itself.
Oh.
So Joey wasn't involved with my casting session. It was this weird in-between time. So you do pilot casting, which is a big deal, and you have to get all of the main characters, and you shoot the pilot. And then when you go into full-blown production, there is an in-house casting director that casts all of the guest stars and people that would come on the show. And because my role was part of the pickup process for the show, I don't know if Disney Channel came to the guys and said, hey, look, we need to have a best friend character for Louis. That's a guy. So before we greenlight it, we want you guys to make sure we add this character. We don't know how he's going to be implemented right now, but we want to make sure you add this character. And so they took the initiative on getting the casting done for Twitty or some other scenario. I'm not sure how that went down, but it was interesting that Joey cast the pilot and then cast every other character on the series, but Twitty was the one character that was not cast by that office.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as the character of Twitty goes, a lot of people were wondering if you had any input into who he was, if they wrote anything into the character besides the music aspect that was a bit of a personal touch for you, anything like that?
Yeah, so the writers were always asking us stories about ourselves and would have us come into their office and just talk about different things. At the time, it just felt really nice because it was like, oh, these guys are interested in us and we get to hang out and talk to the writers and it's all good. And now looking back, I can see that they were looking for some insight into who we were as people and what kids our age were doing and interested in, which is very smart on their part. So definitely the music played a big role. Music was just a thing in general on the set. Christy was a singer. That's what I'm pretty sure grew up doing Broadway.
Yep.
Shia and I had started a little band that we would rehearse in the conference room where we would do the table reads and stuff during lunchtime. He had a drum kit, and I would bring a guitar down there and we would play. The band was called Frankie and the Foreskins. Matt Dearborn named it.
That's amazing.
And then Margot was in the band for a while too, playing keyboards. And then for some asinine reason, Shia and I decided that we didn't want Margot in the band, which is so ridiculous. It's just so ridiculous. Yeah, so that was just stupid. And then we only rehearsed for a little while, but we would always be playing guitar in the waiting room where people would come in to like do auditions and stuff. That was our lounge area where we would hang out in between takes and setups when we weren't doing school. And we played a lot of music there. So it was very easy for them to fold that into the show. Later on, surfing became a big thing. So David Brookwell, one of the executive producers, was a diehard surfer. He taught myself and Shia how to surf. And so on the weekends, we would go surfing with David. And so most of the time, at least for a while there, Shia would, if I worked on a Friday, Shia would come home with my mom and I and stay over on the weekend. And then we would go surfing a couple of times. My mom would drive us down to go surfing. Sometimes Shia's mom, Shayna, would drive us to go surfing too. But Shayna, she's so great. Shayna would only take Vine Street places in Los Angeles. Yeah. Vine is this long street, but she didn't like getting on the freeway. So it would be like, how do you get there from Vine Street? We have to figure out like how do you travel the 25 miles to the beach, but only taking Vine Street, which I remember as being fun. And Shai and I would strap the surfboards to the top of her Volvo and get down to the beach to go surfing with David Brookwell. And sometimes Sean McNamara, one of the executive producers, and he directed a lot of the show, he would go surfing with us as well. That eventually made its way into the show. Yeah. And then Sean and David went on to do a lot of different surfing projects, like Beyond the Break, which Matt Dearborn wrote as well for them. And they did...
Didn't they do Soul Surfer?
Yeah, they did Soul Surfer, which is a big thing.
You had a song in Soul Surfer, yeah?
Yeah, we did. Maven had... what was that song called? Oh, The Sound of Forever. Okay. Yeah, it was in Soul Surfer. So surfing they did a lot of stuff that incorporated surfing. Awesome. But we did that episode Surf's Up, which was one of those things that incorporated some surfing.
Yeah.
I remember Shia got a surfboard from the guys for his birthday, and it was like, oh my God, this is so cool. You got a surfboard. And then they gifted myself. So Shia's birthday is in like June or July. And then my birthday is in September. So when my birthday rolled around, they got me a surfboard as well. And it was just the coolest thing to get a surfboard for your birthday. This was this was huge. And they would do little things like, I remember I was doing a terrible, terrible British accent around the set because I thought it was funny. And they incorporated that into Movie Madness, the episode. Oh my God, this British accent was bad. And we had a on-set acting coach, but really he was there to help Shia memorize his lines, I believe, because Shia had so many lines and worked basically every day and had to do school that it was just a lot to expect of a kid. So they had Richard Lyons on set as the on-set acting coach, the person to run lines with us and stuff. And he actually studied dialects, and he studied British accents in college, I believe. So he was giving me instruction of like, well, actually you pronounce the word like this, not like this. And I was like, yeah, but that doesn't sound as funny, so I'm going to do it this way. He was right, ultimately. But
But it was funny, so.
Like an Australian hybrid.
Yeah.
Oh, it was terrible. And that's why they wrote it into the show, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
Because it was so bad.
It's one of the best parts of that episode.
Yeah, it's pretty awful.
Did you play basketball or baseball like Twitty too, or no?
Yeah, I did not play baseball. That episode, I think Tom Burkhardt wrote it, although I could be wrong. Tom's a good friend today still. Whether he wrote it or not, he had some experience with pitching. So I remember him taking me out and teaching me how to pitch so I could get some of the movements right. I did enjoy filming that episode. And with basketball, I did play basketball in junior high. So maybe that folded into it. But Matt Dearborn was a big basketball fan. Still is today. After Even Stevens, I would have meetings with Matt, and Matt would take me out for a hot dog, but I would also have to rebound him while he shot free throws.
Amazing.
So he would shoot free throws, I would rebound the ball, and we would have a little meeting.
Yeah. He and I have the same team, the Warriors.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
He had a really good run.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's a cool guy.
There were a few episodes that were a little bit more Twitty-centric.
Right.
Did they just come to you with those ideas one day, or just like those scripts just showed up and it was like, oh, I guess I'm getting more of an episode now? Or did you ever express interest in giving Twitty a little bit more to do?
I'm sure we had ideas. I don't remember specifically, but if we did have ideas, they would have been totally off the wall and pretty crazy and stuff that they were not necessarily paying attention to. As I've gone back and rewatched a lot of episodes since Disney Plus got released, I'm noticing just how well, and also now I work and have for the last 7 years in development of kids and family television. So just how well crafted a lot of these episodes were, and tracking the Lewis storyline with the Ren storyline and how they intersect and how they feed off of each other. They both want different things, and that puts them in immediate conflict with one another in terms of getting there. A lot of really good writing and stuff that's very well crafted. But in terms of, was I giving input into what was going on with Twitty? No.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a big question, actually, if a lot of people wanted to know.
Would you say your sense of humor, your style was similar to Twitty's at least, or was that just a product of the show as well?
Yeah. For me, again, I really learned on the job. I had no idea what I was doing when I started. No idea. And I had only slightly of a better idea by the time we were done. Where on the other hand, watching Shia on that show, he got it from the beginning. He really knew what he was doing. He was very good with comedy, understood exactly what was going on the whole time. So I very much learned on the job. I learned a lot from Shia. You can see the evolution of Twitty from season 1 to the end of the show. And so most of what was happening there was not conscious. It was, they were writing, I believe, for who we were as people and what we did good naturally. There wasn't a conscious design to the character of Twitty. It was probably very similar to myself at that time versus the character like Tom Grabowski, where Fred was doing something with Fred Myers, the actor, was doing something with Tom and making him very much a character.
Yeah.
I did have these few moments where, like, I can remember specifically in the episode Deep Chocolate, where we're selling chocolate. I think this is season 1, Lewis and Twitty are. And there's this scene in the house where we are panicking because we've ordered too much chocolate.
Yep.
For me, I felt like I had this revelation of like, oh, this is what Twitty is. This is just way over the top, totally out there, just like an insane person. And I had so much fun shooting this scene. This is by far the most fun I'd had working on the show up to that point. And it was like a couple days later, Matt Dearborn brings me into his office and sits me down and says, hey, dude, so I want you to know that scene that you shot in the house, we can't ever do that again. Okay. There can only be one idiot in a scene, and Twitty's not the idiot.
Right.
That's just not how this is going to go. So I just want to teach you how comedy works. And I was so crushed that, because I thought it's gone so well. I was so impressed. Only later did I realize Matt's 100% right. That was not what I was doing, was not the right thing to do at all whatsoever, but I had so much fun while doing it.
Yeah.
So a lot of the show was a learning process of trying things out. I don't know if everyone felt that way, but certainly for me and Twitty, it was a trial and error, trying to figure things out as we went along and seeing what worked and what didn't. And sometimes it did, and sometimes it didn't.
That's one of the best scenes, though, honestly.
I was going to say, that's a really good scene.
I had fun.
What works so well between yourself and Shia, both of you guys can play the straight man, but also both of you guys can play the idiot so well. You know, sometimes when Lewis was the straight man, Twitty was the fool, for lack of a better term. And then the other way around, too. Sometimes Lewis was the crazy one and you were kind of there to ground him a little bit. I think that's what made you guys work so well, is either of you guys could play that role, and it didn't feel like it was a different character. Like, it was still very much within, because you each had your own style of playing it, each one of those roles too.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a fair point, and that's how real friends are.
Exactly.
When you're two best buds, that's how you interact with each other. Especially at that age, you're still figuring out is my comedy work better as the straight guy, or does my comedy work better as the fool, as you said. And Shia and I hung out all the time. So as actual real life friends, we were figuring that out too.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of that made its way onto the show. I think that's a astute point, Ethan.
Well, I'm a big Boy Meets World fan as well, and the earlier seasons are my favorite because Sean and Corey are very much like that. The later seasons, Sean is very serious, and I'm not as big of a fan of that. And then Corey's just always the fool.
Crazy.
But earlier, it was so good, and you, Twitty and Lewis, are very reminiscent of that dynamic in Boy Meets World early on.
I always thought of myself as the Ryder Strong
Exactly.
of Even Stevens. And later I ended up working with Ryder on a show called Pepper Dennis.
Oh, yeah.
And we became friendly. So
Nice.
That was cool as an early influence of mine.
Cool. You guys had the similar hair also.
Yeah.
A lot, like more than one person wanted to know about your hair. So you had like the Sean Hunter, Nick Carter 90s butt cut thing going on.
Yep, big time. I was super serious about it too.
So you wanted that hair.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Really what I wanted was the Eric Von Detten hair.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I was always going for. I remember one day, so Ty Hodges, who played Larry Beale, was friends with Eric Von Detten. EVD, sometimes we call him.
The legend.
And so EVD shows up on set, and he shows up I remember all of these details, in a BMW M3, silver BMW M3 convertible, okay? He's wearing a white t-shirt and linen pants and sandals, and has a super cool hair, and he says something like, "Oh, sorry, no, my toe hurts. I stubbed my toe on my boat this morning." And I was like, this is the coolest guy in the world.
A bit of a humble brag there.
This guy's so cool. And I told my mom, I was like, "Mom, you have to come see EVD's hair. His hair's amazing. We gotta." And so then the day goes by, and I'm walking into the hair and makeup trailer, and EVD's walking out, and he's like, "Yeah, your mom came up to me and told me that you wanted to know where I got my hair done." And I was so embarrassed. Man. I was just totally mortified. But that's what I was going for, but my hair would just poof out and kind of go crazy. So I never really got the EVD thing going on. But that's
his hair always looked wet for some reason. I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, like super gelled or something. Yeah.
I think the last time I saw Shia, it was like in Toluca Lake in front of a Robex Juice. We just randomly saw each other there. This is pretty soon after the show was filmed. And he said something to the effect, basically making fun of me because my hair looked wet. And that was, I think those were like our last parting words, something to do with my hair looking wet. And
well, that must have been the highest compliment if you had still been in the Eric Von Detten phase.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So we kind of talked about it a little bit, but you mentioned working with Shia and kind of inadvertently learning a lot from him. So just as far as working with him goes, back then, were you aware at all of, the level he was at, or, what he was bringing to the table? Was it apparent to you as his co-star, as someone who was working with him constantly?
There were a few instances where I remember thinking, oh, he's doing something totally different. He's operating on a level that I just don't understand. And the one that comes to mind is on the episode Quest for Coolness, where we're after these sneakers, these quasi sneakers. And I don't think they cut it into the show, but it was when we're going in the elevator down into the basement and we're really freaked out. And I'm just acting freaked out, right? It's all a farce. I'm like, really hamming it up. And Shia is getting himself to the point where he's like on the verge of tears in the elevator as we're prepping before they say action. And I'm going, oh, in my head, oh, we're doing that now? This is serious? We're really going for it? We're really doing this thing? So that was one instance where I recall Shia being on another level. I can totally see it now going back and looking at the show and appreciating what he was doing. But at that age, when you're in it, most of the time it was harder to recognize the level of difference. But he was great from a very early age. And even before Even Stevens, I think when he was doing he did an episode of Freaks and Geeks, which I saw not too long ago, going back and rewatching that show. Yep. He was great from the very beginning. He really just got it.
Yeah.
Sure.
I did also, again, Disney Plus, rewatching episodes. The Sausage episode, what's it called? Raiders of the Lost Sausage.
Lost Sausage, yeah.
He has this comment where he's referencing Indiana Jones about you have to take the sausage off and you have to put a counterweight on. And I thought, oh, that's funny that, later in life he would go on to do Indiana Jones, and here he is.
What was your experience on the movie, on the Even Stevens movie?
So twofold. One, I was really jealous that everyone got to go to Hawaii except myself. The only regular cast members that didn't get to go were myself and Margot, because we were not written into that part. We did shoot a Hawaii scene, but we shot our Hawaii scenes at the Arboretum in Pasadena or Altadena. And then they shot the reverse of that, where you actually saw the water in Hawaii. Again, this ties into David and Sean's love for Hawaii and their desire to go there all the time.
Yeah.
And so I was devastated about that. And Margot ended up flying herself out there to hang with everybody, which was such a good idea. I should have thought of that. I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
And I think she and Shia may have been dating at the time, because they did date for a little while after the show. And maybe they were dating during that portion, the Hawaii thing. I can't remember. Other than that, the scenes that I did shoot in LA, I just had the best time. It was so fun. Specifically, I remember being on the sailboat, and we were on the sailboat for an entire day, and it was just the most fun. And I absolutely loved being on the sailboat. Right after we finished wrapping on the movie, I went and took lessons to get my sailboat license, or whatever it's called when you get licensed to sail. I just had a really, really great time. Tim Meadows was in that. That was cool to work with him. It was fun to do the same show, but have it be on this new scale. There was a little bit more money to do some more things, and that was cool. And it was fun that we got to come back and do one more thing where the show just wasn't over, because it seemed so abrupt, the end, coming after 3 seasons. Yeah, it was nice to do something else. And things had changed a little bit already, because Shia's career really was taking off, and he was doing, things had started already to move. And the rest of us, it was like, working, but still glad that Even Stevens had the movie coming back and some other stuff. So there was a little bit of a shift there. But all in all, it was a good experience.
Nice. And you did You Wish before the Even Stevens movie, correct?
I think that's right. I think we actually did them in the same year. I can't remember for sure. You
filmed that in New Zealand?
Yeah, I filmed that in New Zealand. I remember not wanting to go because I was feeling like I was this is so ridiculous, going to be away from my girlfriend at the time for too long.
Wow.
I could feel it, yeah.
That's how it goes, though. That's how it goes.
You're 15 and you're like, well, this is so important to me.
Yep.
It's amazing how important those things seem in life at 15. But I went to New Zealand. Paul Hohen was the director of You Wish. He directed quite a few episodes of Even Stevens.
To this day, he's a big Disney guy.
Oh, yeah. And Paul and I still work together now that I'm in development. We've worked together quite a few times. You Wish was so much fun. That was amazing. And Lelaine and I became good friends on the set of that movie. It was great. I had an awesome time in New Zealand doing that film. It was like 4 weeks. I had tested out of schools, I think, so my mom didn't have to come to set with me. She was in New Zealand, but I got to go to set by myself most days. And a car would pick me up because I couldn't drive yet and take me to set. It was awesome. I really enjoyed that.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great movie. I love that.
Yeah, it's one of our favorites.
When it came out back in the day, I was like, oh, this is like the best DCOM that I've seen. And it holds up, I think, still.
Thanks, guys. Is that on Disney Plus?
Yeah, all that stuff.
Oh, cool.
And I just think it's funny because you loved Brink, and then now you got to be star of your own DCOM, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Oh, this was not lost on me.
Yeah.
This was all, it's just like everything's going according to plan. This is all perfect. And, you know, I would have done more Disney Channel stuff, but things just started to shift. Things started to change. I remember Sean and David were going to go do Phil of the Future.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I had auditioned for the part of Phil on Phil of the Future. We were going to go do this show.
Wow.
I was really reluctant to do more Disney Channel stuff. Again, this is so typical of a teenager of like, oh, I'm going to move on. And Disney Channel is like, I don't know. It's like cramping my style. It's just not my thing anymore. And Sean sat me down in his office and said, AJ, you have to do this. Okay. This is going to be great. We're going to do the show like this. You're going to love it. It's like, okay, Sean, we'll do it. I'll do it for you. I go to test for the show, which means you've signed the contract already. You've negotiated your deal points. And then you go to the studio test, which means basically at that point, if there's no more auditions. You either get the role or you don't. And when I show up at the test, they're testing two families. They're testing mom, a dad, and a sister, and I'm reading with them. And then they're also testing another mom, a dad, and a sister, and I'm reading with them too. So I'm thinking, oh, wow, well, I've got the part of Phil. There's nobody else here reading for Phil. It's just me. And they're testing these two different families. Well, this is cool. So one of these families is going to get the part, and then I'm going to play the part of Phil. And when I didn't get the role, I was like so surprised. And it went to Raviv, who Ricky Ullman is what he goes by on Disney, but his name's Raviv. And he was a good pal of mine now. And I just remember being so surprised at that point. These were all my guys that I worked with. It was the same crew as Even Stevens, and it was the same executive producers of Even Stevens. So it was an almost was.
Right.
Phil of the Future was an almost was for Disney Channel. And then my friend Alan Sachs, who did You Wish, he was the producer on You Wish, and he produced like Smart House and Color of Friendship, and he also did Camp Rock.
Oh.
And I remember auditioning for Camp Rock thinking like, oh yeah, this is going to happen. Camp Rock is going to happen for sure. And then the Jonas Brothers ended up doing Camp Rock. And Alan went to work with the Jonas Brothers on quite a few projects after that. I think he actually managed like their television company or something.
Your band did the American Dragon Jake Long theme song.
Yeah.
And then it was eventually replaced with the Jonas Brothers in the second season.
That's right. So I almost had a longer relationship with Disney, which I would have been thrilled about, but it didn't quite pan out. Although the development team over there, specifically Adam Bonnet, really helped mentor me a lot as a development executive and as a producer. And I spent time shadowing Adam at the Disney Channel. This is what I mean, the 21st floor at the Disney Channel building has been such a big part of my life. So I spent time there learning about how to be a producer and develop kids television and do all of that stuff. So Disney has had a major impact on my life 20 years running at this point.
That's cool.
Right. So they came to you with that sort of stuff, like the DCOM role, the doing the theme song for American Dragon, or?
Yeah, You Wish I had to audition for.
Okay.
So it wasn't a straight offer. I did have to audition for it. The American Dragon thing they did present to us, and I remember, again, just being super reluctant, like, oh, I don't want to do this. It's so lame. But it was a great experience, and we had a lot of fun in the studio. Jamie Houston was the songwriter, who I think wrote a lot of the music for High School Musical. And if not High School Musical 1, then High School Musical 2. He's pretty prolific at this point. He's written a ton of stuff in that genre. But he wrote that song, and we recorded it and then did the music video. It didn't feel like the best of fits. I think we were a little bit off on that. You know what? I actually may be misremembering that. Jamie Houston maybe didn't write that song. Jamie Houston wrote the song that we did for Herbie Fully Loaded. We recorded a song for that soundtrack. Somebody else wrote the American Dragon, or maybe he wrote both. Sorry, just can't remember. But it was a good overall experience for the band doing the music video and recording the theme song and stuff. And it's fun to see the small debates that take place online. Very, very small. Nobody actually cares. But the Who Did It Better, Maven or the Jonas Brothers American Dragon theme song.
Did you write like Sacramento Girl and stuff or any of those songs, or what was your input on that?
Yeah, so I did write some of the music along with my mom actually helped on one of the songs.
Oh, wow.
I forget the name of the song, but it was something we did for Band on the Roof, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, Another Perfect Day or Crazy or...
Crazy. Yeah. Sacramento Girl was written by our receptionist on Even Stevens, Alex, who was a musician and songwriter. And we would hang out and play guitar with him again in the waiting area. That's where Alex worked and would answer the phones and stuff. And so we would hang out and play guitar. I don't know which producers approached Alex and said, hey, do you want to do this song, Sacramento Girl? So he actually wrote Sacramento Girl. And then Jim Wise, who played Coach Tugnut, wrote a lot of the other music for the show and a lot of the lyrics and stuff. And he's from, I think he's from the Groundlings, not Second City. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so he's from the Groundlings. And, you know, was really famous and very well revered for what he would do with improv music. The fact that we had him on Even Stevens writing, like he did most of the music for the musical Influenza. I think he did Another Perfect Day, which was in Band on the Roof.
Yeah, he did.
Yes. So, I mean, he was just incredibly talented and wrote a lot of the music as well.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Speaking of just more, music, Disney Channel stuff, you were part of what I refer to as the We Are the World of early Disney Channel. Which is the Circle of Life by the Disney Channel Circle of Stars.
Yeah.
And you sort of had that Bruce Springsteen moment in there with the rasp bringing it to the table.
I was going for it.
That's the best part of the song.
Yep. Really going for it. I remember being on the set of that shoot. And everyone's there. It's Hillary, it's Raven, it's Christy, it's I think Taj Mowry was a part of it.
Orlando Brown, Kyla Pratt.
Orlando Brown, Anna Van. What's her name?
Annalisa Vanderpool.
Annalisa, Vanderpool. Yep. There were so many of us, and so we're filming. So we had to do the recording. Then we had to film the music video. There's all like this dancing going on and this cool stuff. And I'm so out of my element trying to figure out what the hell am I doing. I was amazed that they used one line that I sung because it really stuck out like a sore thumb compared to everything else that was happening. And then we had to do these interviews. And I think this was all in the DVD for The Lion King when they re-released it. We did these interviews and I remember everyone really hamming it up in these interviews. Like, and that was the moment I realized there's this Disney Channel kid persona that when you're interviewed, you are bright and sunny and bubbly and witty and cracking jokes and doing this whole thing and not giving honest answers. You were like entertaining the audience. I just was never capable of that. I never did a good job. I just would fail miserably. So I would have to give these really honest answers. About like what my favorite character in The Lion King was and different things. And I don't think any of it made it into the cut because it was just way too earnest, way too honest. And just, they're like, no one wants this.
But I think that like earnestness really shone through with you and Shia too, like both of you guys. I mean, obviously that's what also was a big part of Even Stevens was there was just this really kind of almost like grit to it, for lack of a better term. It was really real and it didn't feel glossy, too perfect and stuff. And when you guys did your interviews for like I forget what they're called, like the Disney Channel.
Express Yourself.
Yeah, Express Yourself stuff.
Oh, right, yeah.
You and Shia, you guys both always gave really real answers to stuff. Sometimes like Shia would play it for, I think he was doing a bit sometimes and doing something, a comedy bit.
Yeah.
But like you would always give like a really real answer. And also Lee Thompson Young also I felt was like that too.
Oh, right. So. Absolutely. No, you're right about him. Yeah, that's very true.
And it really did shine through in those moments and on the shows that you were in too. And I think audiences could tell.
Yeah, maybe you're right. That sort of natural acting style where everything we would say dude a lot and man a lot.
Yep.
Sweet.
Buddy.
And we would improv and just keep it. That came from Shia. He was really the one paving the road for this is all going to be natural. This is going to be real. We're not doing this Disney over the top like thing. It took me a minute to catch on to what was happening, but eventually I think Twitty got there with these are just two buds hanging out and this is how buds talk and we're playing this as natural and real as possible most of the time.
Was sweet your word?
I think that's one of those words, that I was saying and they incorporated.
I still say sweet to this day, and it's because you say it.
You know you're quoting Twitty, but nobody else knows that you're referencing Even Stevens and Twitty.
My friends all throughout my life, they've adopted this term, just sweet. Oh, sweet, bro. Sweet.
It's a good one. I support it.
We got the most specific comment about this too. Like when we said we're going to be, talking with you, we got the most specific comment that was like, now the way he says sweet is like so specific. It's like, and it is though. It's kind of like sweet, an emphasis on the T there.
Yeah.
And they wanted to know, they're like, was that your own doing or were you instructed to say it that way? Just the most specific comment about the sweet.
Oh, we got some very specific comments.
I have no idea is my answer. I do not remember at all.
Good answer.
Oh man. I feel like we were just saying something that was sort of going into, oh yeah, Ethan, you were talking about how the show feels super real and doesn't really fit the Disney mold, which I think sort of goes into the stuff that you brought up on the Zoom reunion call, AJ.
Right.
Which was, Even Stevens existing in this weird middle ground that wasn't really like anything that came before it, which was the, so weird Jet Jackson and the Jersey, but then not really like anything that came after it. We talk about this stuff all the time about, Even Stevens' little place in Disney Channel history. Did you feel that back then that you guys were like the awkward Disney Channel show, or again, was that just not something you thought of?
Yeah, I think it's yes and. We really felt different from So Weird and the Jersey that was on before us. We felt very different from that. But at the time, we felt cutting edge. We didn't feel like oddballs or weirdos. We very much felt like this is the new way that Disney Channel's going. We're right at the forefront. This is so cutting edge.
Yeah.
And then Lizzie came out a little bit after us, and I do recall feeling, and I know that when we did our 20-year reunion Zoom call, the producers expressed that they did not feel a rivalry. As an actor on the show, I do recall feeling a bit of a rivalry with Lizzie McGuire. It was a little bit of an us versus them kind of mentality. I remember feeling like, really, for no reason. I don't think I'd ever seen an episode of the show. It was not, and it's a great show, actually, going back and looking at it. So I, the way I look at it now is Lizzie McGuire and Even Stevens stand apart from the rest of what Disney Channel did.
Yeah.
They were both single camera, half-hour comedies, and the way it was explained to me is that back at that time, Disney Channel hired production companies to handle their productions because they could do them non-union.
Yes.
And they could do them non-union and not have the Teamsters unions step in and go, hey, you guys are Disney. You can afford to go union and you guys have to, so we're going to picket this production if you guys don't go union. And in order for Disney Channel to get around that, they would hire production companies. Everything would get funneled through the production company. They would do it non-union as far as the crew went and film these shows for a lot less money. As a result of going that route, you had this real hands-off approach from Disney, which then let the creatives, being Matt Dearborn and Mark Warren and Dennis Rinsler, really make the show that they wanted to make.
Yeah.
And something really cool happens in that space when you have seasoned, experienced adults making kids programming that they want to watch.
Exactly.
So you get this elevated state of comedy, these elevated storylines. It's just better because they're never writing jokes or playing towards the kids. They're never writing down to their audience.
Exactly.
They're writing stuff that they think is funny. And kids, my opinion is kids are way more sophisticated than we give them credit for. Really, the things that keep kids hooked on watching shows, and this is just going from my own experience, it isn't just the jokes, because kids aren't just trying to run around laughing all day, but when there's compelling storylines and compelling drama that gets them sunk in where they have to sit there for the 22 minutes or however long it is and figure out how the storyline is going to play out, that makes for compelling, enticing, and interesting content. And then the jokes that come on top of that are just the icing on the cake. And I know that Matt Dearborn always approached it that way. He was never approaching it from a comedy first standpoint. He was approaching it from what's the most entertaining storyline we can possibly tell, and where does the conflict come from, and what's going to be compelling for these characters. And then the jokes would come later. They would punch it up with jokes. That is one of the things that made Even Stevens exist in this middle ground, is the fact that Disney had to be hands off because of this policy that they had of hiring a production company to get around the unions. And the same thing happened on Lizzie McGuire. So they exist in this weird space. After that is when the success of these shows, they started to have to reckon with what was going on with the unions. That's So Raven still slipped under the radar. Again, that was Brookwell McNamara producing that show, which they did go multicam. But it's still different than what things would become with like Hannah Montana in the future of Disney Channel. That's So Raven still feels a little bit different. And so eventually they got to the point where the unions go, we see what's happening here, and you guys can't get around the issue anymore. So rather than hiring a production company to handle their productions, Disney Channel would do the productions directly, and they would just hire a showrunner to handle it, and they wouldn't funnel it through a production company anymore. And that's when I feel like things really started to change. And Disney Channel was way more hands-on with each one of the productions. And it's cool that there was this interim period that it's really Even Stevens and Lizzie McGuire, and then there's a couple of other shows that make the list. That's So Raven would be kind of towards the top of it and be in that grouping. Which, when I look at the rankings of what are considered the best Disney Channel shows of all time, it's usually Lizzie McGuire, Even Stevens, and That's So Raven.
Yeah.
That's interesting when you put it that way. We haven't heard that spin on it, which is cool.
Yeah, we were just kind of forgotten out there too. We filmed in an old chainsaw factory in Marina Del Rey
warehouse.
Yeah, where they eventually filmed Baywatch, and then it was us. Nobody wanted to go out there.
Yeah.
Disney's offices were in Burbank. Nobody wanted to go drive. There was nothing going on in Marina Del Rey back then either. So let's go to this weird factory in Marina Del Rey and like sit on. No one wanted to go. So, and you couldn't Skype in to a table read or something. So we were just on our own, just kind of doing our thing.
I have to sit on the 405 and then the 10 and then like all these freeways that you don't want to be on.
Yeah. No way. Forget it. So they just kind of left us alone. And I think the show was way better off for it.
Oh, totally.
Because it was unique. It was that specific creative team's brainchild. And later with Disney Channel, everything started to get pretty homogenous, which may be really great from a brand standpoint, and totally get where they're coming from with that. But Even Stevens and Lizzie McGuire specifically were what they were because they were more or less left alone.
Definitely.
It's interesting to think about how that affected Even Stevens in the long run. It is, like, even though it definitely is one of the best shows, it is often one of the most overlooked.
Oh, totally.
Sometimes underrated, forgotten a little bit.
Yeah.
Like when people talk about Disney Channel nostalgia, it usually starts with Lizzie McGuire or That's So Raven. Like Even Stevens still fell through that little area where people still kind of forget. And we talk about there's many reasons why that could be the case. The fact that it was a premium channel up until a certain point, the fact that it was more of a guy show, and then Disney Channel kind of became more female oriented.
I think that's a big one.
There's a bunch of different components, and we're always trying to nail down why exactly that is. But at the same time, we kind of like the fact that it's kind of helped contribute to Even Stevens having like a cult status almost.
Sure.
The real ones remember it and and appreciate it.
It was the time period when Disney Channel was more gender neutral, where they were not trying to specifically appeal to a female audience.
Right.
And I thought we did a great job with that, of male and female storylines and having something for everybody.
Totally.
Lizzie McGuire certainly was a step into what they would become, which was much more geared to 9 to 12-year-old girls. And I think they kind of conceded the crown of, for lack of a better term, king of boys programming to Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
And really let them run with that. So then there was these two different camps, whereas Disney Channel was more for girls and Nickelodeon was more for boys.
They created Disney XD.
Right.
Which was like totally just guy-oriented stuff.
Exactly, yeah. And that's what it was for. It was supposed to be boys programming, which, Matt Dearborn and Tom Burkhardt did Zeke and Luther for Disney XD. But I like the gender neutral thing is so important. It just seems like a better way to go. I thought that was great. And that also harkens back to the shows that I grew up loving on Nickelodeon, like Salute Your Shorts, like Pete and Pete. Again, this is good programming for young people, gender neutral. And I don't know that it is important necessarily to be tribalistic at that age. Because we are 12 to 13, 14 filming the show. So generally speaking, your audience is going to be 2 to 3 years younger than the cast members that you have on the show. That's usually how it works.
Yeah.
And when you're at that age, 9-ish years old, 10-ish years old, there isn't as much need for tribalism. So boys and girls are watching a lot of the same stuff, and and it can be funny to both. So I tend to prefer the more gender neutral shows, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Nickelodeon, I grew up on Nickelodeon too. Salute Your Shorts was actually my favorite show. Yeah, even Stevens was, even the stuff before, like Famous Jet Jackson was very much, I think, like it had just a male lead.
Yeah.
Whereas even Stevens had a female lead and a male lead.
Right.
And it was one of the only ones, the few that had that, I think, that I can even think of.
And Jet Jackson was also very, if I remember correctly, was like super moral based. It was like every episode is going to have like a real like important story or like a real like thing. And then, even Stevens, there were some episodes, but
it was more the Seinfeld of it for kids. There was,
it kind of was, yeah, it really was.
2 other shows that come to mind for me were Clarissa Explains It All, and The Secret World of Alex Mack.
Oh yeah,
yep.
And that's the other side of it, where you had 2 female leads, but again, doing shows that were gender neutral. I loved those shows.
Me too. I love
They were
those
fantastic.
Shows. Yeah.
Can we get some more of that?
Yeah.
Folks, can we get more of this gender neutral type programming? Male lead, female lead, who cares? It doesn't matter, but it's stuff for everybody.
I love Lizzie McGuire, and I mean,
Lizzie McGuire is a great show.
It didn't feel like a girl show to me. I loved it.
Yeah.
And they did have Matt in there, but he was younger.
Yeah.
He usually had some plots. Like
he did.
Lizzie always had the main plot, but there'd always be like maybe a 5-minute length Matt plot in every episode.
Yeah. And That's So Raven, I felt, was pretty much for everybody too. And the Corey character is very similar to the Matt character in Lizzie. They're both
for sure
the little brother, conniving,
schemy, kinda,
mischievous, figuring things out.
Yeah, I feel like we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but back then there was still the 3-season, 65-episode rule basically for every show, even if it was super popular. Because I know you said with the movie when you did it, it felt like, okay, good, it's not totally over yet, because it did feel kind of abrupt. Basically, how did the 65-episode rule affect you and the series? Like when you're young, you're on the show and then suddenly, okay, time's up.
Yeah, I mean, that show was everything at that time. It was as important as your high school experience is to you. It was that times 10 probably, because it was also wrapped up in your professional aspirations and the biggest dreams that you have for your life at that point. It's all wrapped up in that show. These are your best friends. This is where you go every single day. This is your extended family, this group that you belong to. So, and this is something that came out when we did our 20-year reunion. Crew members that were on the show that since Even Stevens wrapped, they've gone on to do hundreds of, if not thousands of productions since then. As an actor, you have to audition and go through all this process, and you have to be exactly right for the role and blah, blah, blah. When you're a crew member, you work all the time. And a lot of these crew members on that 20-year Zoom reunion were saying this is the greatest production that they've ever worked on. They loved the experience. Everything about it was so great. It just reminded me of, oh yeah, that's really saying something. And other people felt this way, that this was a very significant production and we all had an incredible time together. So when it is your whole world, it's everything. When it's coming to an end, it was incredibly disappointing. It was good that the production staff let us actors know, oh, this is just Disney's rule, 65 episodes. So even at that age, we were aware that this was something we didn't have any control over and it was always going to come to an end. Right. But it was super disappointing. My goal as an actor was not to be a super famous movie star. My goal as an actor was to be on a show with people my own age. That 70s show was always sort of the benchmark of like, that's success. You're working with people that you really enjoy and you're just having the greatest time and everyone's your age. And Even Stevens, in a lot of ways, even though we were younger than the cast of that 70s show, was my own personal version of that. So, working with Shia and Margot and Christy and Lauren, and the list goes on. Yeah, it was really disappointing when it came to an end. And it was hard to make sense of at that age, like, what, 65 episodes and you're going to go into syndication, and why don't we just keep going? But I think part of the explanation we got is that if Disney were to do more episodes, a few things would happen. One, they'd have to renegotiate contracts with the actors, and the actors would expect to be paid more, and then it would make the show too expensive to produce. When you are making programming for young people, eventually they're going to grow out of the show. They're just going to be too old to. And there's arguments for and against this. Like, you know, Boy Meets World was on for a really long time, and I think there's people that watched it from the beginning to the end and grew up with those people and didn't care that it was a show for young people. So the argument was that you start watching the show at 9, you do 3 seasons, you end up watching the show until you're 12, and you're kind of phasing out of Disney Channel at that point, and you're going to go watch something else. But there's a whole new audience of 9-year-olds that can start over. So rather than paying more to produce more episodes, we're just going to rerun the episodes that we already created. And it's completely new to those kids. They've never seen any of this stuff before. So why do more? Also, you know, kids grow up. And so you'd have to age the show up. They'd have to go to junior high and then to high school. And if Disney Channel's brand is that these kids are in junior high, that's the age group that we do, does it start to get awkward? There's less flexibility at that time with Disney Channel. I think the first show to break that rule may have been That's So Raven.
I think it was. Yeah. They made it to 100 episodes.
Oh, wow. Okay. So even Lizzie McGuire only did 3 seasons, and that show was wildly successful as well.
They actually only did 2 seasons, but they crammed 65 episodes into 2 seasons.
Oh, really?
Oh, is that what?
Yeah.
No, I didn't realize that either.
I think today it certainly would be different. You'd have the opportunity to do more seasons. But at that time, yeah, it was what it was.
How often do you get, would you say you get recognized for Even Stevens? Or how often does it come up, I guess?
Yeah, nowadays it's a whole lot less, of course. There's just less people that are familiar with the show. But for a little while there, it was pretty crazy. It was amazing how many people watched Disney Channel, and I think that's indicative of our generation, how important Disney Channel was. It was the thing. Like, it was as popular as Instagram is now, or TikTok, or whatever people are doing. Like, the only thing there was to do was watch Disney Channel, and it was for young people. It felt like, oh, this is the thing that I watch, and I watch it with my friends, and it's not for my parents. This is just for us. And nowadays, kids are on YouTube and doing whatever else.
Oh yeah, we'd come to school the next day after there was a new episode.
And we'd all talk about whatever
the
last episode was.
Yeah.
We're answering like so many listener questions organically right now, like it's not even funny.
Sweet.
I've kind of a random question. Did it happen often where you guys had a hard time not breaking character, or were there any infamous moments where you guys had a hard time finishing a scene?
I don't remember any specific events, but my favorite thing to have happen on set is when we could not get through a scene because we would be laughing too much. I lived for that. Nice. That was the best feeling, especially when you would be doing somebody's coverage, and so let's say we're shooting Shia's coverage. So they're doing a close-up on Shia, and he's the only person on camera, and Margot and I are off camera reading lines for Shia. If we could make him laugh and not be able to get through the scene and do the take, that was the best feeling. Nice. It was, and I don't know if everyone felt that way, because it's horribly unprofessional. It's not something you want to be doing, and there's a lot of money on the line, and people want to go home to their families, and you want to make the day. But as 14-year-olds, that was the best. If we could just make the other people laugh, it was
awesome.
Fun.
That's awesome.
I can feel that. Like, you describing that, I was like, yeah, totally, I can see that.
Oh, it's great. It's just so much fun.
Yeah, so speaking of being one of the kids on the show, because like I said, you know, you're the first kid from the show that we've had on the podcast. All 3 of us are sort of, you know, around the same age. You were on Disney Channel while we were watching it. So just what was, you know, a typical day or week like on set as a kid on the show?
It sort of felt like we kind of ran the set, because I mean the main protagonists were kids. Mm-hmm. Going back and watching the show, I no longer feel this way. But when I was on the show, to me it was the Lewis and Friends show. That was everything. I didn't even know, like, the fact that there were Ren storylines or parent storylines, they were totally irrelevant to me. It didn't mean anything.
Right, yeah.
It being the Lewis and Friends show, it kind of felt like our set in a lot of ways, because it wasn't a kid on a show with a bunch of adults. Everything ran through this filter of being kid friendly, and that made the whole experience so cool.
Right.
And I think that the crew members And the production staff and the writers kind of embraced that, and everyone was a little bit more lighthearted and a bit more relaxed and jovial as a result of it being kids show and there being real kids on set all the time. So it just made for a really cool, friendly work environment. I mean, it was junior high, it was high school. It was great. It was just a big extended family. I just recall really enjoying being on set all the time.
Right.
Getting along great with all the crew members and having, having relationships with everyone from the prop people to the gaffers to the hair and makeup people to the writers upstairs, our other castmates and stuff. It was great. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's cool.
I know. I can't imagine. Yeah, it's that whole, growing up basically on a Disney show, which, they always say there's only the very small percentage of people who understand what that's like.
Yeah. It was so fun. So I did an episode of Christie's Kitchen Throwback. So that was so fun to go do. I hadn't seen Christy in a really long time.
Right.
The on-camera part was fine, but again, you're doing that sort of like performy Disney Channel kid actor thing when you're on camera. But afterwards, we just sat on her couch and talked about life and, remembering some stories from the old days. And you have to have been there in order to know what the other person is talking about.
Right.
And so that was so cool to catch up on a lot of that stuff, especially because who else are you going to talk to about it?
Exactly.
You have to have been there. And on that same day, Lelaine was filming her episode of the show too.
Sweet.
So Lelaine showed up.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen her in forever either. So I got to catch up with both of them. And that was awesome. That was so great.
That's cool. Do you have anything from set from Even Stevens?
Gosh, I don't think I do.
Just curious.
I wish I had a little something,
Yeah.
but I don't think I have. I don't think I have anything.
Okay.
I think my mom still wears like the Even Stevens fleece around. We would get a wrap gift at the end of each year. There'd be like a crew wrap gift.
Right.
One of them was a fleece. I'm pretty sure she still wears that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's cool. I got the hat, and then I think, Brittany, you got
cool.
Dennis
sent us a
so
couple
cool.
cool.
He gifted us some stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
Super cool, yeah.
Yeah, so Ethan has like a crew hat, and then I have the blanket from the Emmys.
Oh yeah, the blue one with the gold
Yep.
stitching around the sides.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
Super nice.
Definitely
Super nice
cool.
of him. He's been super, just kind of making us feel good, by saying he's like, you guys are part of the crew now,
I've never heard the podcast. I didn't know it existed. I had no idea because I'm just not on social. It's not really a thing. I have like a very limited presence.
Yeah.
And it was on the reunion call where Dennis and Mark were just singing your guys' praises and talking about how great the podcast was and everyone should go do it. So when you did hit me up on Instagram, I was like, yeah, I'll do it. That sounds great. I'm so glad you guys asked.
Of course, yeah.
And that's because Mark and Dennis were just crazy about it.
Yeah.
That was pretty awesome. We were watching that, and then and then we called each other after, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, they mentioned us on the reunion."
Yeah.
We were
Cool.
like, "Whoa, that's cool." That was like surreal.
And it was so nice too. Like if we felt a part of it, it was like
This is what the whole experience, that's so indicative of the Even Stevens experience, is everyone was it was a great crew of people. And it sort of started with Mark and Dennis, right? Just being two good guys, being two great showrunners. And it all trickled down from there. And to, Matt Dearborn, the creator of the show, was incredible. Sean and David were so great. So everyone at the top of the food chain on that set was awesome. And as a result, everyone else underneath was awesome too.
Definitely, yeah, I can see that too. Just the limited people we've spoken to, it's like, everyone's really down to earth.
across the board.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite episodes from the show?
Well, Ethan, we're gonna get into that.
Oh,
There's a
yeah?
whole segment,
okay.
right? Did you do your homework, AJ?
I did my homework.
Okay,
yeah.
good.
Oh.
I mean, I'm a little torn over what I'm going to choose exactly,
Okay.
but yes, I did my homework.
Okay, so there are. Let's see if there's any one more like question or so. I'm making sure I go down and check off all the ones that we've touched. Pretty much everything.
Just as a quick aside, did you see Honey Boy?
That was the next thing on the list.
I have not seen Honey Boy.
Okay.
Your name is in it.
There's an AJ name drop.
Yeah, I have heard
Yeah.
this. I haven't seen it yet. I intended to see it in the theater. It just didn't happen. I left town for a couple of months. I was in Europe, and by the time I got back, I wasn't in Europe for a couple of months, but I left town. I was in Europe. By the time I got back, the movie was out of the theaters, and I just haven't gotten around to watching it on
Okay.
Right.
TV yet, but I do intend to watch it.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
I've heard amazing. Yeah, I've heard amazing things.
And I was pumped that your name was in it too.
I mean, I was like, who else could that be referencing? I think that's pretty specific.
There could have been another AJ. Yeah, there could have been another one.
The younger Shia in the movie just says like, oh, like AJ got me tickets to the Dodgers game, or like we're going to go to the Dodgers game together or something. Was that something you guys did back then, or?
We never went to a Dodgers game. We went to a St. Louis Cardinals game, I remember. We went to St. Louis, Shia, Nick, and myself to do this Joe Torre basketball charity event where Nelly, of all people, was there playing basketball. And he's incredible at basketball. He was such a good basketball player. But we were in St. Louis and we went to a Cardinals game. That was a fun experience, going out there. That was good.
So I think that's pretty much all of the questions. Did you have anything else, Ethan?
I was going to ask you what your favorite movie was.
Oh God. You know, I watched so many films over the course of quarantine.
Same.
If I had to make a list, and don't hold me to it, maybe this will change in a few months, I'm going to put Shawshank Redemption at the top. Maybe I'll put Goodfellas at number 2.
Good one.
Maybe we've got Fargo at number 3.
Nice.
And then the next 2, it gets a little iffy. Like maybe it's The Big Lebowski. I'm going to leave it at those top 3. Let's go. Okay. I feel good about this. I feel good about Shawshank Redemption, Goodfellas, and Fargo.
A couple Coen Brothers ones in there too.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ethan's a big movie guy.
Yeah.
Big movie guy.
It's a great thing to love during quarantine.
Oh, yeah. My day job is a film critic, so I would just...
Oh, cool. What are your top 3?
Oh, I have a weird list. So my number 1 is Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Whoa.
And then American Graffiti.
Okay.
And then probably Back to the Future.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Would not have expected that.
2 time travel movies and a movie that takes you back in time. So
yeah.
Yeah, we're like so different with so many different things. Like I feel like my movie tastes are just so mainstream. Like mine would be my number 1 ever is Titanic.
Whoa.
We have a Titanic. So we have a second podcast that's a Titanic podcast.
Oh, cool.
Completely my idea.
Yeah.
Dragging Ethan into it with me. But yeah, so it would be Titanic, then School of Rock, the 2007 Hairspray.
Whoa.
And the 2002 Sam Raimi Spider-Man.
I love how shameless these are. This is so great. You guys, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that Spider-Man? Is that Tobey Maguire Spider-Man?
Yes.
Yeah. I love that one.
Yeah.
That's the one I grew up with. You know, it's usually the one you grew up with that you have that.
You know, the thing I appreciate about your guys' list, and it just goes to the power of programming for young people, is every movie you listed is something that you watched at a certain age for the first time.
Yeah.
And it had such an outsized impact on the rest of your life. And remember, when we say we love these films, a certain percentage of that is the feeling we got the first time we watched it.
Totally.
Yep.
And that is the thing that we love the most, regardless of how great the film is on its own, if we were just critiquing it on its own merits.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever that feeling was that you experienced, like if I was going to do my own list along those lines, it would be those things I referenced, which are Romeo and Juliet, Scream, and Can't Hardly Wait.
Oh, great movies.
What a ridiculous list of favorite movies. But the feeling I got watching those was so incredible. When you're a young person and you're watching entertainment, you're just so blown away by it in a way that it's like impossible to experience that in your 30s or 40s or 50s. And we should be making more very high quality content for young people, because the level of impact it's going to have on them for the rest of their lives is pretty amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So again, you have to really respect your audience. You can't, you have to understand how smart young people are and stop this sort of pandering, which is just giving them cheap jokes and cheap laugh tracks and stuff that is just a waste of everyone's time.
Yeah.
So why don't we just make great content? It's not that we have a lack of great writers and a lack of great directors and actors and creatives that want to make good stuff. It's that we, not to be insensitive, but like we think kids are stupid and they can only understand stupid comedy. And that's just not the case at all. Because when we were 5-6 years old, we were watching The Goonies or watching E.T. or whatever it was that was quote unquote kids programming at the time. That stuff was way more sophisticated than what is currently coming out on television.
And I think there should be a resurgence soon, because a lot of people who grew up with that kind of stuff I think are now just starting to get onto the creative side of it.
Yeah, you're right. They're of the age to be doing it.
You'd think that soon there's going to be kind of more of a shift to that type of comedy or that type of quality.
I hope so. Yeah.
There's such a specific humor now online with kids that is also not stupid. Like there's this weird quality to what a lot of kids online find funny now, which is almost, it's like kids love The Office. Kids love, this offbeat, awkward kind of thing. So it's just kind of interesting. But I think that's interesting because we've gotten a few younger people to write to us and say, I started watching Even Stevens on Disney Plus and I absolutely love it. Like, I'm obsessed with the show now. It's become one of my favorite shows. And, we both still love this show into adulthood too, obviously, because there was a lot for everyone, as we've been talking about. It's just been kind of amazing to get emails from someone. Like, I haven't even told you this one yet, Ethan. We got an email from a 12-year-old.
Oh, wow.
And she was like, hey, I'm 12 and like, I've been listening to your podcast and like, I love Even Stevens now. And all this stuff, it's just super cool, and like so many kids are, seeking out what they want to watch themselves.
When you are using the vehicle of Disney Channel, it's so easy to find stuff.
Right.
Because it's such when you're doing linear programming, well, it's the show that's on Thursdays at 8 p.m. So I'm going to try it at least. Versus in the streaming space, there's such an overabundance of programming. It's almost impossible to sift through everything. There's so many shows that have come and gone that I didn't even know ever existed.
Right.
I still feel like there is such value in the linear. I'm actually a big proponent for linear programming.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of against the streaming binge watching model.
Oh, yeah.
Which I like that a show comes out once a week. I like that it comes out at a certain time. I like the watching it live, participating, and then having a conversation afterwards.
Totally.
As opposed to FOMO taking over and then just, well, I didn't watch all 10 episodes and everyone's already done it, so I'm done. I'm moving on. I'm never going to watch it.
When you take into account the streaming thing too, then it relies on marketing, like how well do people are just
how can you get it out there?
Yeah. Versus if something is just on TV, you're like, oh, I didn't even know the show existed, and now I'm going to watch it because nothing else is on.
Right.
Yeah. So it's taking all of those elements, like you were saying, Brittany, of the streaming platforms have more flexibility. They can do really cool offbeat stuff that Disney Channel, for their brand has been built so big that they can't necessarily do anymore. Can't take those risks. But can you have it in that drop an episode a week type model where people can really experience and participate in the show as it goes, all of that stuff. Yeah, it'd be really cool to see us get back to something like that.
Something like that. I remember arguing with someone about how with this, which also will probably segue into something else, but with like the potential Lizzie McGuire reboot,
right? With
Disney Plus, they were saying a lot of their shows will be released weekly, and I was like, oh, thank God,
right?
And I was like, I hope that's the case with Lizzie McGuire, so that not only just to have that experience of just watching it once a week, kind of feeling like it did when you were a kid, but also just to be able to savor it. You know what I mean? It's like I grew up watching Lizzie McGuire weekly.
Yeah.
It's like it'd be nice for me to continue doing that as an adult. I don't want to have to watch everything all at once and then it's gone,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you can't, it doesn't stick with you the same way.
No,
it doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't stick with you the same way.
It doesn't take up as much of your life as it it did when it was a constant in your life every week,
And maybe a part of that is you associate, again, you're watching that, you're in 7th grade and you're watching that show every single week. Well, now your entire 7th grade year is a part of the memory of watching Lizzie McGuire.
Yeah.
It's all wrapped up together. So you watch Lizzie McGuire, you're transported back to 7th grade, the music you were listening to, the friends that you had, the people that you were interested in romantically, all of that comes back to you. But if you watch it all in one afternoon, there's no associated memory.
Totally, yes.
And all of this stuff goes hand in hand. It's all a part of a bigger picture. You can't, you binge watch a show, you haven't, you like wake up, you're like, what the hell just happened? Were you dreaming? And it's so much easier to forget it. It won't have that lasting impact.
Right. And there's so many other things to watch that you're like, okay, I'm done with that now. Now I have to watch something
Moving
else.
on to the next thing.
It's like I feel this sense of panic.
Me
There's
too.
so much stuff to watch
me too.
that I just just get paralyzed and I can't watch it all. That's why another reason why I like that linear schedule of, well, I can't binge watch it. I have to wait, which gives me room to watch these other things that I want to watch.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
So why don't we move on to a segment? And we love segments on this podcast. And so since our podcast is based on ranking the episodes, we're super excited because, we did this for the first time with Mark and Dennis, and it was just like, oh, we have to have everyone do this now. So I'm glad that you did it. Appreciate it. Why don't we'll count them down 5 to 1. Number 5, your number 5. Is this number 5 best or number 5 favorite? Would you say?
So all of my things are favorite, and a lot of the favorite for me has to do with certain memories from shooting the episodes.
Right.
So the watching it for me has a different feeling than it would have for people that weren't a part of the show.
Oh yeah, sure.
So a lot of this has to do with favorite memories of actually making the show.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go in order, but this also has no particular order for me. But
Okay.
Other than top 5.
Okay,
Gotcha.
so number 5.
Okay, number 5, I'm going to go with Close Encounters of the Beans Kind.
Sweet.
Awesome.
So filming, in particular, this whole sequence with inside the house where we are getting goggled up and getting our spray can together because we're really convinced that Beans is an alien.
Yep.
And we're going to have to do something about it. It just felt, at that time, I remember thinking, like, this is the peak experience of we've really got Twitty and Lewis figured out and their relationship, and it's equal parts funny and over the top and wacky, but also grounded and really going for something. And that episode stands out to me of just feeling like really comfortable, like we'd kind of hit in our stride and we're really doing stuff. And then from a viewing standpoint, the ending of the episode with Beans going, blah,
It's horrifying.
it's such a classic moment. I really like that.
Great thing.
It's great.
All right, you doing the setups, or do I just launch into number 4?
Go ahead. Yeah, number 4.
Okay, so number 4 for me is Starstruck.
All right.
Because
Nice.
there was this scene where we're at the recording studio and we're hanging out with BB Mac, and Twitty goes on this rant about he's trying to plug himself and
Yep.
plug his band,
Yep.
the Alan Twitty Project. Have you ever heard of it? And again, it's I remember shooting that scene and just really feeling like in the pocket, and it just going so well, and just had a lot of fun doing that. And it was also part of the beginning of Shia and I, or Lewis and Twitty, getting into doing things like the penny dance and other stuff that would become more of like a familiar motif of different wacky things that they would do together. That sort of was the beginning of that, and something I always had fun with and enjoyed.
You brought the English accent back as well for that scene, and for a split second.
Oh, must have missed that one. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
That's one of my favorite sequences in all of the entire series, is just that studio, and then you have the cheese plate in your lap.
Yeah, right. And and it's classic Shia too, like him doing the tambourine, how he was doing it with his head, and the thing. It's very classic, his humor on and off set. Okay, number 3 is Secret World of Girls.
Oh,
It's the debut of Beans, his introduction, which is so great. Again, it was a heavy Lewis and Twitty episode. I love the ingenuity of starting a business and learning how they're going to make some money and they're going to do all of these things. And it was just a fun episode to shoot in the basement. And I just have a lot of good memories from pretty much everything we shot in the basement was great.
yeah.
Always had fun on the basement set. That was super good.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, number 2 is Band on the Roof. And Band on the Roof, it was directed by our editor, Greg Hobson, it was just a super fun episode. And then I had the opportunity this is the first chance I had to write some music for the show, which was a super fun experience. And I remember going to the recording studio. So it was myself and my mom helped write the song. And in the studio, I brought my dad, and he brought some cool vintage guitars that we got to play. And he played that guitar solo that's on the track. My dad played it,
sweet.
and then showed me how to play the guitar solo. And I still remember it to this day. It's like, again, these things that happen as a young person just get so embedded in your brain.
Yeah.
The fact that I remember this guitar solo is just so weird, but just goes to show like how important it was for me to learn it exactly right. So when we were filming, I could play the solo that is exactly how it's supposed to be played. On the set of that, I borrowed a guitar from Guitar Center. I think it was like a 1957 Stratocaster. No one else would know this. I just thought it was super cool to have on set. So that was a lot of fun filming.
So is
that
that
episode.
Band on the Roof or Battle of the Bands? Because the Crazy song first debuted in Battle of the Bands.
Oh, did it? Okay, so I have the writing wrong then. But did we bring Crazy back for...
Yeah, you brought it back.
It was in both episodes for sure.
Okay, because for Battle of the Bands, I remember Sacramento Girl.
Yeah. They did both.
And do we do Crazy as well?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So there you go.
I was talking about just thinking of like the writing process. I'm like, well, that must have happened
Yeah.
with Battle of the Bands. I mean, yeah.
We watch these episodes a lot.
Yeah. Well, and also on Band on the Roof, stylistically, we're always doing these weird different things. So we do like the mockumentary style for Band on the Roof, right?
Yeah.
And in Battle of the Bands, there's this moment where we're voting whether or not Ren is going to be in the band, talking super close up to camera on this fisheye lens, which is like that show Survivor, which was relevant at the time. Never again did we ever do a segment that was similar to Survivor, and like talking to the lens like that and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so Band on the Roof, here's what I'm going to do for my number 2. Okay, it's a tie number 2, Band on the Roof, Battle of the Bands.
Okay.
Because Battle of the Bands was on my list, but I took it off because I could only have 5 episodes.
Okay.
We're going to put them together.
They totally go together.
Those are a unit, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then for number 1, I have King Sloppy.
Wow. Nice. Good one.
And King Sloppy, for me, that scene, the what's a twofer scene?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mitch Henneman, I think that's our name.
Mike Hageman.
Mike Hageman. Yeah. So Mike Hageman, and we do the scene with the wig and the mustache and all that stuff. That was probably, for whatever reason, my favorite scene to shoot. Doing that little segment. I was always a big fan of SNL, and for some reason that felt, at least the day we were filming, felt very SNL-y.
Totally.
Well, yeah.
And I recall Shia's dad, Jeff, coming up to me afterwards. And this is such a flip, because at one point I was in the makeup trailer and Jeff was there, and Jeff says to me, "You're not funny." And I was like so devastated that Jeff said this. I was a young teenager. I just only wanted to be funny. And Jeff said, "You're not funny." And I was so crushed. And after filming that scene in King Sloppy, I remember Jeff coming up to me and saying, "That was really good. That was really funny."
Wow.
I mean, you're just so impressionable. Like you go through these emotional swings. But I remember being particularly happy with the way that scene went and that whole thing. So I'm going to put King Sloppy for my number 1.
That's a good one. By the way, you are hysterical.
Oh.
Even just in non-even Stevens. I was watching your Nightmare Room episode last night.
Oh my gosh.
And
Oh my God. I don't think I've ever seen that, Ethan. That I filmed with Drake. Drake's in that too, right?
Yep. Yeah, and Brenda's song.
And Brenda. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Brenda almost played the part of Twitty's girlfment.
Allison.
Allison.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it came down to Brenda, and I forget the girl's name that actually ended up playing the role.
Tanya.
That sounds good. But it came down to the two of them, and I remember being in the audition room, and I read with the actresses, and we had a rep from Disney Channel there, and Joey's office was casting it, and they really wanted to give the role to Brenda. I think they'd been kind of like grooming Brenda to be a Disney Channel kid. Everyone was like, we wanted to give the part to Brenda, but Tanya she just brought it today. She just had the better audition, and she really did great. So she got the job, and I was really rooting for Brenda too, because we already had a friendship and had done stuff together. I think we did like a McDonald's / Coca-Cola commercial together too at one point.
Amazing.
But yeah, she almost played Allison Wong.
Yeah, she's great. But the Nightmare Room episode, it's very serious episode, and Drake plays the lead, but you're the best friend, and like you give some really funny moments in that episode, just naturally. Like you're funny for sure, dude.
Thanks, bud. I mean, I've gotten over it at this point, but it being 13, 14, I just remember being just the wind just totally knocked out of me.
Totally. I can see that. Yeah.
And it's funny too because Shia had an episode of The Nightmare Room as well.
Yeah.
With Dylan and Cole Sprouse.
What?
They were on it too. They played the little demon kid.
Yeah,
they played
right.
like the demon doll that came to life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
really
that was one of those shows that we all
sort of went through.
participated in.
Yeah.
Everyone went through that one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've had a really cool conversation. We ranked some episodes.
Secret World of Girls is my number one, by the way.
Yeah, and Band on the Roof is my number one. Oh yeah, you wanted to know our top fives.
Yeah, so please tell me. I want to know why you don't have to do this for every episode, but I would like to know why you each selected your respective number ones, and I would like to hear the top fives.
Okay. You go first, Brittany.
So you want to go first, Ethan?
I'll go first.
Right.
So my number 5 is The Kiss.
Me too, actually. So that's perfect. We're both number 5 with The Kiss.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, we both have number 5.
Which episode is The Kiss again? Tell me just a brief.
It's the one where Lewis and Tawny
accidentally kiss.
Oh yeah,
kiss,
yeah.
And then she does the play, and then Lewis just ruins it, and it's amazing. But it's a good one.
I don't know if this exists anywhere, but when we finished shooting the show, I think it was like Shia's last shot, and Margot walks up down the hallway on camera and kisses Shia on the mouth.
Really?
Out of character, not in character, but
okay.
because they were like starting to date at that time.
Wow.
And there's this great thing of Shia like, pumping his fist as this whole thing goes down. It was the very end of the show. It was I think it was the last shot of the whole thing. It exists on like a blooper reel someplace from
that'd be
season
awesome.
3.
Yeah.
Wow.
See, Disney Plus should release stuff like that, I think. That'd be cool to see.
Yeah, the blooper reels are pretty funny.
Yeah. And then my number 4 is Secrets and Spies, which of course you do the girls do weird things, improv little thing. I don't know if you remember.
I do not remember it, but I'm going to check these out.
That's like another fan favorite moment. People will love that.
Okay.
little bit. Quest for Coolness is my number 3.
Okay.
Phenomenal episode. Broadcast Blues.
Oh yeah.
My number 2, and then
cool.
Number 1 is Secret World of Girls. Just I remember the first time I ever watched it, and this Beans character was so bizarre, and I was like. Yeah. Whoa, it was already my favorite show, but that pretty much cemented, okay, this show is unlike anything. That was the one that did it. And I think it's just a perfect episode. Just every moment of it is just so tight.
Yeah, it's a good one. I went camping this last weekend with Nick Spano and Stephen Lawrence.
Nice.
Beans.
Nice.
Yeah. It's nice.
That's cool.
All right, Brittany, what do you got?
Okay, so my number 5 is also The Kiss. Just because it stands out to me. It was the season 3 premiere episode. It just had this different energy to it. Of course, it was like leaning more into the romancy stuff, which I was super into as a kid.
Guys, this is so indicative and so important because you're both growing up at the same age, whatever. You're around 10-ish years old, let's say. Okay.
Yeah.
A boy and a girl. You just said you were interested in some of the romantic stuff, so you're getting that from the show. You're liking that for The Kiss, but you even also said The Kiss is your top number 5 for whatever reason, whatever you were getting from it.
Exactly.
It's like we can do both things, guys.
Because
we can cross over.
For me, The Kiss, because I didn't even care about the romance. It's a funny episode. Right. It's so well written.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. You can have humor, you can have romance, you can do both.
Totally. Yeah. Totally.
But that's just a great episode that I think is also a fan favorite, really memorable. So then my number 4 is Battle of the Bands. So then my number 3 is A Week First Week, so the original pilot.
Oh, okay.
I never really get tired of watching it because there's just something so fun about being able to see where something started. And it's just so fun to watch like the birth of the show, basically. I think it's an important episode for that reason.
Yeah.
So my number 2 is Secret World of Girls because I know it's such a fan favorite. So I was like, I feel like it's got to be that because obviously it's super memorable. First appearance of Beans. Everyone is kind of in that episode, at least all like the main kids.
Yeah.
It is a solid episode. My number 1 is Band on the Roof. Just because, again, it's another music one, but it's also just one of those episodes that I just feel like everyone remembers.
Yeah.
It stands out because it is a little different with the mockumentary thing, but then also that's one of the things I love about it, because there was like a lot of like awkward stuff to the show, and I think that sort of format just elevated that stuff, and just highlighted it, like some of the interview portions and just a lot of that stuff, and like the looking at the camera sometimes and just everything. It just sort of felt like, I don't know, it just feels sort of right to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's like an unexplored genre or technique to use for a kids show. I think you could do an entire kids show like that.
It's like part of me wished like the whole show was filmed that way to sometimes.
Yeah, it worked well.
Especially because Even Stevens is already such a self-aware show almost.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like
exactly.
almost borderline satire.
Uh-huh.
For something to kind of parody itself almost was really it was a refreshing take, and almost like it was a long time coming in a sense too.
I think so too. Yeah. And it was fun to shoot for those reasons as well.
Yeah, and it's a big fan favorite.
Cool. Well, I'm going to go back and rewatch some of those ones you guys mentioned too. Yeah. This is cool for me to hear.
Yeah. Watch The Kiss. That's a guy, if you haven't seen that one in a while.
I'm gonna.
Really
it's on
good.
both your lists.
Yeah.
Number 5.
I do have a quick question. So you went with, you said Nick and Steven. Do you guys ever talk about Even Stevens? Like how often does it come up in the conversation?
Not often, but in the last year or so, it's come up more because of Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And because Christy did the kitchen throwback. So, so many people participated in that because of the reunion.
Yep. 20 years. It's big.
Yeah. So for those reasons, it's come up quite a bit more. For me, it comes up in my work as a producer, it comes up as a reference point often.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the experience, it only comes up every so often. Like Nick and I have stayed friends since the show, so there isn't really much reason for us to talk much about Even Stevens anymore.
Right.
And Matt Dearborn and I have been friends since the show too, so there isn't much reason for us to keep talking about it. But the people that I don't see as often, like Christy, like Steven, like Lauren Frost, who played Ruby, we will talk about the show because it's the thing, one of the main things that we have in common. So, and we don't see each other all that often.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's kind of funny that you mentioned Lauren. I just remembered some of the questions we got. There was a question that said, it was on Instagram. It was, ask him who his favorite cast member to work with, and that was from Lauren Frost. So I'm assuming we're looking for a specific answer there.
Lauren was my absolute favorite. Lauren was so great.
And the same thing, we got a question, ask him who his favorite producer was on the show, and that was from David Brookwell. So.
Oh, great. Yeah, David was the best. David was definitely the best producer. Yep.
Aside from, those specific answers because they asked, but was there anyone really that stood out or...
I mean, of course I had the most fun working with Shia.
Yeah.
It was so great. And also just being close friends at that time, it was great. And again, learning a lot from him, it was always fun. The whole production staff was pretty incredible. It's one of the biggest things I took away from that show is these long-lasting relationships that have manifested themselves in different ways in my life over the years. The first job that I had working in production was at Brookwell McNamara Entertainment. Nice. I was working as their director of development. And so they 7 years ago started what is now my career. So I'm, really grateful to them for that. I've produced shows with Tom Burkhardt, who's one of the writers from the show. I've produced stuff with Matt Dearborn. It's just these long-lasting relationships that started that long ago. I think is so cool. So I think it just speaks to the types of relationships that we were creating on that show between the actors and the production staff were pretty unique. And then Susie and Sarah were two of the writers that I haven't spoken to in a really long time, but they were so wonderful to be around. Mark and Dennis were awesome. Big supporters of everything that we were doing as kids, separate from the show. So they were really into the fact that we did music. And I'm pretty sure it was Mark's son was in a band called Mystic Frisbee. Yeah. He was very supportive of what I was doing in music and the fact that his son played music and stuff like that. So, I mean, we couldn't have asked for a better production staff. They were all really great.
You still talk to Margot at all?
Yeah, that was a big question. Yeah,
I haven't spoken to her in a really long time, and we were super close for a while there. And Margot dated my best friend. She dated him for quite a while. So I had a group of friends that were also all young actors, and then I was friends with everyone on Even Stevens, and I introduced the two groups. And then everyone was hanging out. We would go to City Walk and, just hang out at Universal City Walk. That was what we would do on a Friday night. We all hung out together. But yeah, hung out with Margot all the time. Haven't seen or spoken to her in many, many years.
Wow.
Yeah, she's like off of social media.
Off the grid, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was, I guess, surprised that she wasn't a part of the 20-year reunion.
Yeah.
Would have been really cool to see her.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I haven't seen or spoken to her in a while.
I think a lot of what you were talking about kind of maybe covered, or at least goes into two wrap-up questions that a lot of people had. Yeah, like what's the biggest life lesson or takeaway you got from your time on the show? And then, going into what you've been up to recently, because I know you work in kids and family, and you mentioned that on Christy's show as well. But I know a lot of people are like, they asked us, they're like, can you ask him like exactly what that is? Like what exactly he does?
Yeah.
And then you were very coy about something that might have been in the works, having Christy be involved in it. And you were like, I can't say anything.
People are freaking out.
and so everyone's just sort of like, yeah. Can you say anything about that? Or are we still sworn to secrecy? Or
So we're still sworn to secrecy on the Christy thing.
Okay.
There's not much I can talk about there, unfortunately. But in answer to your other two questions, where should I start? So my biggest takeaway from the show, I don't know if this is going to answer the question exactly right, but this is what I'll say. Looking back on it, it was such a unique space and such a cool thing to go through, because it's literally living out your dreams, right? Having achieved your goal. Mine was just simply being on a Disney Channel show. Having the reality of living that is so cool and was not lost on me. And I really appreciated every minute of it. And it was really, really neat. And then also appreciating how all of these people that you meet throughout your life, or these things that you go through, how they bleed into and impact your future path. And that was very much true for me with my time on Even Stevens, and the influence the people that I worked with on that show have had on the rest of the trajectory of my life all these years later. So those are two main things I got out of the show, apart from it just being such a awesome overall experience. In terms of what I do, which kind of connects to the last thing I said, I develop television shows for kids and family audiences. So what that looks like is, like, for example, recently I optioned a kid's book, and developed a television show of that kid's book with Matt Dearborn, where Matt creates the concept for the show and how we're going to do it and who the characters are and all of the other things that go into making that a television show. And then we go out with that property to the various networks that exist for kids programming. So it used to only be Disney Channel and Nickelodeon. And now it's Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, HBO Max, Netflix, Disney Plus. But anyway, I'm forgetting one. But there's now 5 buyers where there were only 2 buyers. And so I do this again and again and again. So I've done stuff with David and Sean. I've done stuff with Paul Hohen, as I mentioned. I've taken a few shows out with Tom Burkhardt and do shows with Matt Dearborn. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis, is whether it's optioning books or finding scripts that would be great material or coming up with new ideas. I'm not a writer, so I bring writers on, and then the writer will work that into an actual television show pitch, and then we go out and do that.
Cool.
During the pandemic, is there still work for you to do, or are you just pretty much at a halt?
Yeah, so there's still development work going on. Networks are still hearing pitches. So this is all going to come to an end. This pandemic is going to come to an end, and we'll be back. Productions are actually starting now with new rules due to COVID, but the executives at the various networks are hearing pitches and considering projects and that kind of stuff. So yeah, we've submitted one show during the pandemic, and then we submitted another show just before the pandemic hit. Like, we had a meeting on a Tuesday, and then the office is closed on Wednesday.
You have your finger on the pulse of children's entertainment, which is awesome, because we get a fresh perspective, I think, than we've gotten. What are your views on if Even Stevens reboot or a sequel series or something? Do you think that's viable, or can you not see it panning out? Obviously, it probably wouldn't be children's entertainment, but hopefully.
Well, because that's the thing. Like, we've gotten different answers from different people.
Yeah.
I think it should still be kid. Well, it should be, in my opinion, it should be programming that speaks to the kid in all of us.
Yeah.
So it would need to appeal to you guys, and it would need to appeal to if you had a 10-year-old. It should appeal to both.
Yeah.
And I think that even Stevens didn't do it for people in their 30s. It just wasn't, it was much more geared towards kids. But I would say something like Boy Meets World really did hit both. You could be in your 30s or be 10 years old, and both people could enjoy Boy Meets World. I guess I would see something more along those lines that would appeal to the people that grew up with the show, but also usher in a new generation. I feel like, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it would change things so much to only appeal to millennials.
Yeah. Fuller House did it really well.
Yeah, you're right.
I think Fuller House, and they did a really good job of appealing to, at least at first, appealing to millennials, versus Girl Meets World, which I think kind of lost some of the, obviously, like Corey and Topanga were still in it. It also kind of, you could tell that the demographic was shifted it slightly, whereas you said Boy Meets World was originally, you could watch it in your 30s, and people did watch it in college and stuff, and they loved it.
Yeah.
Versus, I don't think Girl Meets World you could watch as an adult in the same way and get the same thing out of it. I don't know.
What do you guys see as a reboot?
Yeah, exactly. Just on that one note, quick, Ethan. That's kind of the whole thing, is how, like, with Girl Meets World, of course, like, I love Boy Meets World as well. And so tuning into that, and then quickly I started tuning out because I was like, well, this wasn't really made for me.
You totally.
I was like, this is clearly for another generation of kids. Yeah, we're going to bring this show back, but it's not really going to be for you.
Right.
Yeah.
But you could watch Boy Meets World today and still like it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Much like I watch Even Stevens. And my parents
Right.
loved
Yeah.
Even Stevens with watching it with me growing up, and they still remember lines from it. My friends' parents remember lines from it. I don't know exactly what they're going to do with the Lizzie McGuire thing. I don't know what's happening with that.
There was drama around that due to this exact thing.
It seemed like it was kind of tailored more, from what I gathered, towards an older audience and maybe like more mature thing. So I think if that works out and that can pan out and be successful, I think it could change a lot of how people view like the potential for an Even Stevens reboot, I think.
Yeah, because I feel like again, we talk about this a lot, like with a lot of these reboots, we feel like everyone has sort of taken that same path of like, okay, we're going to bring the characters back and they're going to be parents.
Right.
And they're going to have kids. And then like, that's going to be a main thing. But it's like, I don't have kids. Like there are so many people who grew up who don't have kids who like aren't going to watch that really. Or it's just sort of this idea, like when Hilary Duff started talking about the Lizzie McGuire reboot, she was like, yeah, I want it to be a show for like especially for the girls who grew up watching Lizzie. I want them to continue growing up with her into their 30s.
Right.
And she's like, I don't want her to be a mom yet. I want her to go through these, issues and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, oh my God, yes, this is what I've been wanting. Because, all these shows so far have come back mainly for kids. I mean, you probably have a different perspective since you work in this stuff. But as a viewer, as a fan, it's always like, well, these shows are being brought back for the nostalgia, but then the nostalgia is just kind of in the background.
Right. I think that these are all really good points. With Lizzie, because she has the animated character that is explaining her inner thoughts, you can't ever get away from that.
Right.
And so if Lizzie is now 32 years old, you're going to hear the inner thoughts of a 32-year-old woman.
Yeah.
And so that changes the dynamic of you. It has to become more adult as a result of hearing the inner thoughts of a character and the age of that character, which is really important. And on the business side with Lizzie, I think a big part of why that show worked for a comeback is Hilary's fans have really stuck with her and are so ready for a Lizzie reboot, and they're right there, ready to go. And they relate to who Hilary has become in a big way. And so it just all makes perfect sense, and you can absolutely age it up. It doesn't need to be for young people because they're all right there. And even Stevens, we don't have that central anchor point that is a direct connection to the fans, which makes it a little bit different to just make it as a nostalgia thing. I guess the show itself does, but there isn't a persona that necessarily anchors it like the way Hilary anchors Lizzie. What do you got?
I don't know. See, because Ethan, I feel like you would probably say Shia was probably it for you as a guy growing up, you know?
Well, this is true, but Shia's persona is as a very serious adult actor. It's like,
But but I will say though, Hillary and Lizzie, I mean, you can make a case that they're so attached,
Interchangeable.
oh, totally. Yeah.
and I can I know exactly what you're saying, and that's a good point. Versus like now, if someone says, "Oh, like Shia LaBeouf he's playing Lewis Stevens again," like it would be awesome for me, and I'd probably like wet my pants. But at the same time, I think people have a hard time divorcing Shia from his very public life and being able to accept him as Lewis. I think he's totally capable. I think he's a phenomenal actor. He's, one of the best in my opinion. But I don't know. I think there'd be so much press behind it that it would overshadow the intent of the project, maybe.
Yeah, there's kind of two versions of an Even Stevens reboot, which is the version that Shia is a part of, which is so specific because you have to take into account all of this extensive body of work that he's had and fitting Even Stevens into the continuity of that and whatever that.
That one would need to be aged up.
Yeah, right. Whatever that means.
But that's the one where we probably lean more towards.
Right. And then there's the version without Shia, but then there's always the elephant in the room because Even Stevens, the conceit of the show is there's a family of overachievers, and then there's this one kid that just can't seem to get it together.
Yeah.
And that's the whole concept. That is Even Stevens. So what do you do? There are ways around it, and that's where it gets really fun to try to figure out, well, how do you take that? And so that's why a new cast of young people, because how do you replace... If Shia isn't a part of it, how do you replace what Lewis represented in the show, which is the black sheep and the family of overachievers?
And I think that could really be powerful too if they did have Lewis Stevens back and he was, because there are tons of people my age and myself included for a while. There is this sense of, for a millennial, you kind of don't have the same outlook as like maybe your parents did, where they went to college or didn't go to college and they got a job right away and they did all this stuff and their whole life was like planned out for them.
Oh, this is fun. Oh, I like this, Ethan.
Versus now, like my friends are like bouncing around job to job and like changing jobs every year, and it's like a lot of my friends have no idea what they're going to do, and they're like 30. So I think that would be cool.
The generation of kids that graduated college at the height of the Great Recession are forever changed and very unique in the course of history because of the job market that they graduated into.
Totally.
There's something interesting about Lewis being a part of that and the trajectory that life takes. And what did you ask Matt Dearborn this question?
Yeah.
Yes, and his answer was like the furthest thing from what we wanted to hear at that moment, which was basically like, just doing the show all over again for kids, but like a new not a new family, but just basically like a Lewis 2.0 that was a little kid. And he even mentioned like Twitty and Ren being the parents, and that threw us for a loop.
I wouldn't be against it, but
yeah, but that was weird.
But then I think it was Sean said something in an interview. Was it Sean? And he said he envisioned it like an HBO show where it was kind of like a little grittier, and because he's like, oh, it'd have to be grittier because this is Lewis. Like Lewis isn't going to just grow up to be this, clean cut Disney kid. Like he will be like, he's going to make bad decisions and like all this stuff.
He was speaking in terms of it being with Shia. Yeah. He was like, and he was super excited. He was like, could you imagine Shia LaBeouf playing Even Stevens today?
I do like the idea of the grown-up kids and one of them bouncing around, not having their life together as the continuous black sheep of this overachieving family. Because Ren is naturally a state senator or, following in her mother's footsteps.
Oh, yeah, she can be president or something.
Doing something like that.
Running for president, something, Yeah, definitely. For sure. But yeah, we are always entertaining the ideas of this.
Did you check out Girl Meets World by chance? Did you ever see it?
I did. Yep.
What do you think about that versus Boy Meets World?
I agree with you guys. Just it wasn't made for me, so I didn't feel any of the nostalgia. Yeah. It wasn't a nostalgia play at all. I felt like it was just a well-executed sitcom for the Disney Channel. I felt like it was different than normal Disney Channel fare because you did have the original showrunner of Boy Meets World doing that. Yeah. Ryder Strong and his brother directed a lot of the episodes of that show too. Mm-hmm. It did feel like, in a way, like a sort of elevated Disney Channel content. I was a fan of the show for certain reasons, and but it didn't pull on my heartstrings from a nostalgia perspective, just because it wasn't, and I don't think it was meant to. Really.
And there were moments though. There were really some good moments with. Obviously, they brought in Will Friedle a couple times, and Ryder was in a couple episodes, which was really cool. And that stuff was cool. But yeah, I definitely thought it was almost too high of a bar that was set, because Boy Meets World is so good as far as like the emotion of that show is so unparalleled for a show to do it that effortlessly. And I don't think you can really match that. Or it's either organic or it's not organic.
I agree with that. I also think that it's interesting to think about the two different types of throwbacks. So in the case of Lizzie and Even Stevens, you only had 3 seasons. Everybody was a kid for the life of the show. You only know them as kids.
Exactly.
And so now you're doing a reboot with adults versus Boy Meets World, where they did whatever it was, somewhere between 6 and 10 seasons. I don't know exactly the number.
Right.
7, I believe.
Yeah, like we kind of already got to see them
as adults.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
College
they were in
see
college.
Their life. Yeah,
That's
it's
true.
a different type of reboot.
But that's what's interesting though. It's right. It's like we never got to see these characters grow up.
I agree with you. No, I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Now it's like maybe we should get to see them grow up. You know. Yeah.
It'd be interesting. I'm just. There's so many different routes you can take.
I think it would be interesting too.
But like you said, it comes down to the 2 versions, like Shia or no Shia.
Yeah. That's such a huge part of the DNA of the show.
That's a big component.
Yeah, you have really good points and a good view on it. I think that's why I wanted to take your take on it, because I think it would be a lot more realistic than the ones we've heard, and it is for sure. So yeah, appreciate it.
Would be cool.
So do you have a dream Even Stevens reboot where like anything could happen? It doesn't have to fit any sort of mold or anything. Where would you see your character now?
Like storyline wise?
Oh gosh. I remember sort of thinking on the 20-year reunion that it would be funny to see, hopefully it's not too depressing, but it would be funny to see Twitty still pursuing the band and still recording and just really living in that zone and bouncing around, like working at the last DVD rental store that still exists in Sacramento and sleeping in his parents' basement and still pursuing music and really wanting that to work out. It's very depressing, and
it's real though.
And I don't know if that works for the overall, without giving it more consideration, the overall dynamic of how Twitty fits into the rest of the Even Stevens family.
Right.
Because there was always this thing with Twitty where he never his personal life never drew too much attention, and it was always about how he either facilitated or made difficult the plans of Lewis.
Yeah.
We never saw Twitty's parents.
No, and I think you only know his name as Alan because of the girlfriend episode. Like there's such a limited degree of information about him. And so he exists again to help Lewis, whether that is because he's helping him carry out his plans or keeping him from carrying out his plans, but he's there to help his friend. Right. So the function of Twitty is there to do that for his friend. So I guess the backstory of where Twitty is at in life is only relevant because if Lewis comes back, then the question is, have Lewis and Twitty stayed friends throughout the last 20 years?
Right.
Or does Lewis come back in the picture and hit his old friend Twitty up because there's some new plan that they have to go scheming on? And then the life that Twitty has led up to that point, separate from Lewis, is relevant only because it's, thank God my friend Lewis has hit me up and we get to go relive the glory days and go on some adventure together.
Right.
Because I'm tired of, again, working at the video store or living in my parents' basement or whatever this mundane, boring, or maybe he just worked an office job and has a regular life and is super bored with it. So Lewis hits him up and there's some exciting adventure to go get involved with.
That's kind of cool.
I could almost see like a Romeo and Michelle type of thing where like Twitty and Lewis are like living together and both of you guys have not necessarily fulfilled your dreams and your career aspirations, and you're just trying to figure out a way to get to that next level. Find the value of life outside of those dreams, I guess.
I just thought of like every episode being them trying to come up with a different way to try to achieve this stuff.
Yeah, I guess I feel like if they had stayed friends for 20 years, that they cared enough about each other that they would have encouraged each other to get out of
Yeah, it's true.
whatever hole or bad situation. But if they didn't have each other in each other's lives and things went awry, that when they come back together, it would be like, oh, this is the thing that's been missing, and now stuff's going to change because I've got my old buddy back.
That's good too.
Right.
So now we're really going to make something happen. We drifted apart for whatever
Right.
reason, probably because Twitty got a girlfriend and Lewis couldn't handle it, and there was a Yoko Ono involved.
Yeah, and he just had to hang out with Tom all the time.
Yeah, right. But then in the coming back together is the opportunity to like, now we're going to shake things up and things are going to be different. Of course, it all fails and they learn something else in the process, but
Yeah.
it's the journey.
Yeah,
Honestly, that'd be amazing. I'd watch it.
that's a really
Yeah.
cool idea.
I'd for sure watch that.
We were dabbling as well with the idea of like Lewis eventually like meeting that family standard, but then realizing, wait, like I gave up my comedy dreams, or like I missed out on this other stuff in my
Yeah.
life. I want to try to get that back.
Yeah, that's-
like if he somehow ended up being successful in something. I always just say engineering because he was always making the craziest things like it was nothing, and I'm like, I really hope he would put that to use into adulthood somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then yeah, like being successful in that area of his life, but then realizing, well, wait a minute, this wasn't really all it was cracked up to be.
I like that.
Being like a Stevens,
Yeah.
you know?
It's that touches on you always want your endings to be surprising yet inevitable. And if that's where the show started with Lewis, it would be surprising in that he was always the class clown and the comedian and he wanted to be the funny guy, but it's also inevitable because he comes from a family of state senators and overachievers. I forget what Steve Stevens did.
Lawyer.
A lawyer, right. So, of course, he ends up in college and he does that whole thing and that's where he is, but is miserable and still screwing up in one way or another. That makes a lot of sense. I like that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
There's so many interesting ways to take it.
You
Like,
got to get
yeah.
Matt Dearborn on it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, you got to get everybody back on it. You know, like we said, like the original series was lightning in a bottle. If you were to try to do it again, you got to have everyone back.
Yeah.
And that would work too if Twitty was working the office job and then like Lewis has an epiphany and then he hits you up because you guys haven't talked for a few years and he's like, dude, what are you doing working at an office, bro? Like you're a phenomenal guitar player, you know, and we got to get back into it. And then
That's how the scheming begins. Yeah. That's how the scheming begins. Yep.
yeah,
Amazing.
Cool.
Wow, this conversation is wonderful.
Yeah, this is awesome.
I am so enjoying this. This has been great. Yeah, I knew it would be interesting to have a kid come on the podcast, like someone who understands or would, you know, look at the show from that perspective or have an understanding of the show from that perspective.
Yeah, I want to sit down and interview I alluded to this in the 20-year reunion, interview the producers, because I'm so curious of what it was like to be an adult and what they were keeping from us kids. Like, what was the secret gossip that was going on set that we had no idea of?
Oh yeah.
I want to sit down with Dennis and ask him some questions. So my friend Chris Marquette and I, who actually was in an episode of Even Stevens,
Yep,
he
of course.
played Evil Lewis.
Yep.
He and I have been best friends since we were probably 13 years old, and we are now doing a podcast. It's called The Coogan Chronicles, and it's former child actors, being him and myself, interviewing other former child actors about their time in the business and entertainment and all that.
That's
go.
awesome.
Yeah.
You should have them on you and Chris's podcast.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going. Right now, it's just other former child actors, but we are
that's
going to
true.
get to people that have worked with former child actors and have been a part of that world in various capacities. So, yeah, that's a good idea.
You guys post any yet?
We have not. So we've banked about 5 episodes. You guys know the drill. So we've done our theme music. We're edited everything. We're banking episodes. We're recording Beans tomorrow, actually.
Awesome.
Yeah, just kind of getting all our ducks in a row before we put it out there.
Did you have anything else, Ethan? Because
I
think
do not. Yeah,
that's just about it. Hopefully we covered a lot of stuff. And yeah, like we call these cast and crew interviews, but I really like calling them conversations. I feel like this has been a really great conversation with you.
Nobody else is asking Even Stevens questions.
Yeah.
So you're the only people in the world talking about Even Stevens.
Yeah, I
That's
know,
true.
but that's why it's such a niche thing here that we got going on.
No, yeah. Thank you, man, for taking the time to talk to us. I know this was a long one, but it was awesome.
My pleasure. Yeah, it's fun. It was fun to reminisce about a lot of this stuff and talk about it.
Yeah.
I really haven't talked about the show this in depth in 20 years since we wrapped doing it. So it was a fun trip down memory lane.
Oh, for sure. And it's always just so great being able to, hear these stories and all these thoughts from the people that were involved, from the people that, did it. This is the highlight of doing this podcast, is how we somehow ended up here.
Yeah.
Being able to talk to you,
Yeah.
don't know how it happened.
Yeah,
but
thank you guys for doing it. I think it's cool to provide context and hip a new group of listeners and watchers to the show and to inform the conversation beyond just the episodes for longtime fans of it. It's cool that it all exists now on Disney Plus, and it seems like good timing.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.
All right. So
Yeah.
thank you
Thank you,
so
man.
much
Thanks,
for
AJ.
coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. It was fun.
It's been such a blast. Thanks so much, man.
Cool, man.
See you, dudes.
So that was our interview, or conversation rather, I like to say now, I think, with AJ Trauth, aka Alan Twitty. Oh man. Amazing.
He was definitely top of my list for interviews, I think. So
Yeah.
that was amazing. I mean, he's been a guy, like I said, a guy I looked up to since I was a kid. Such a nice, personable dude and super smart. I mean, you could tell he knows his stuff. He's been obviously in the industry for a long time.
Yep.
But even just in the context of, children's entertainment, like he can kind of frame the Even Stevens conversation and the nostalgia conversation differently than I think other people can. It's more similar to how you and I can
Talk
frame it,
about
but
it,
he's in that world.
I think that was one of the most interesting parts of the whole conversation, was how, we got to that point where, we all were coming at these ideas from a different perspective, but it kind of worked, like all of us just spitballing all these things. And it was just such a fun part of the conversation.
You gotta think that's almost like how a writer's meeting would go. Like if you're trying to pitch an idea or kind of come up with a plot or an idea for something, which is kind of cool.
That was definitely fun. That was a highlight. And then of course, as always, just all the stories, the memories, the perspective that he has, again, from being one of the kid actors on the show. I knew that was going to be a really interesting angle that we haven't tackled yet,
Yeah.
That was such a fun aspect to this one. And, I can only hope for more like that in the future. All the kids definitely have something different to bring to the table because, they all had a different experience and they all have their memories. And there's so much now, swimming in my head about what we talked about. Some things I can't even remember, but all I know is that the vibe was awesome. He was awesome. I feel like we touched on a lot of great things. And as well, I want to let, our listeners know, as far as, answering direct questions, one of the reasons why I think it's best to approach these interviews as conversations now, more so than question, going down the list sort of, way interviews are sometimes, is that I feel like you get the most natural vibe when you just have a conversation. So we had all of you guys' questions written out, like printed out on paper here. And as the conversation went on, we were checking off things we were hitting. So throughout this entire conversation, I checked off pretty much every listener question that you guys submitted. So although it didn't get to be the sort of situation where it's like, oh, and that question was asked by whoever, I hope that, even though we didn't get those little shout outs in, that your question was still answered and that, that.
And a lot of the questions, like there are some duplicates, I think, too.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like hard because it's like if three people ask the same question, it's like, how do you present that? But and also doing it more conversationally, you get kind of to places that you wouldn't naturally get to otherwise, and you end up asking questions that you didn't even think to ask in the first place, and sometimes those are the most interesting ones.
Yeah. Someone had mentioned, like someone wanted to know if he had any memories of the Amanda Show, and then almost right out the gate he just organically started talking about the Amanda Show, and I was like, oh well, that's perfect. And then so questions end up getting answered organically very quickly and very frequently during these, I think. So
Yeah.
I feel like it's a lot less going down a list of questions and more just talking and hoping that a lot of these questions get asked. And if they don't get asked, then ask the ones that we didn't check off, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had 5 pages of printed out like size 14 font, so not too big either, font of questions and just topics to hit on, and I did check off every single one. So
yeah, how I do it is I just kind of brainstorm just the whole week. I'm pretty much every time I think of something, I add it to this document, and then like the night before I rearrange everything so it's kind of all the Even Steven stuff's in one thing, all like the personal stuff, all like the late app post Even Steven stuff, so that way it's kind of organized. But I mean, the way it went, like you said, I didn't even officially ask most of these questions. I checked off every single one, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I also think that says something about the questions that people had were things that just naturally came up, like good questions. I hope the interview was satisfactory, guys. I think we covered everything we had, at least for today, because you never know. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I know we did. This was such a great experience. That's about it for our interview with AJ. Thank you guys so much for listening. Follow on all of the socials, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube as well. We post all of our episodes there too. So if you ever wanted to just leave a episode specific comment, you can do it under there, I guess. We never really mentioned our YouTube channel on here before. Of course, send an email to evenstevensranked@gmail.com. The website, evenstevensranked.com. Send a voicemail. There's so many things. So with the voicemail, of course, it's calling the number in the description or sending us a voice recording. Yeah, hope to hear from you and hope you guys enjoyed this interview or conversation, whatever you want to call it. And we will see you guys in the next episode.
See ya.